don't lie. And so, Tracy, why don't you do a roll call, please?
Okay.
Sorry, she's here, she's saying, so apologize. Sorry.
Hello?
Hi, Catherine. We're all here and are starting the meeting right now.
Okay.
Somehow I'm getting multiple calls from you. Could I get you to hang up and call me back?
I think that's what I did. You're on the right line.
But I've got, what it tells me is I've got multiple calls from, but it can only be from one number, right?
I accidentally dialed you with a cell phone. I hung up. So you're now
Oh,
on
you know
the
what?
you're now on the speakerphone.
I'm gonna hang up and you can call me back because I'm right now logged into your cell phone and the hard line.
Call back.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll call
me
back.
Bye.
Thanks, Catherine.
Okay, Tracy, why don't you do a roll call, please?
Okay. Director Slater Carter.
Present by phone.
Director Boyd.
Here.
Director Wilson.
Here.
Director Harvey.
Here.
Director Hubert.
Here.
All right. And the only statement I have is to welcome Tracy. And I want you to relax. I don't think anything we're going to be discussing today is life and death. I think most of us survive the afternoon or evening, so just enjoy us. Tracy, how long have you been with us?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. So she has been newly employed, and maybe Clemens, you can talk about a little bit of what's going on in the front office.
Yes, we've given the board already an update at a prior meeting. So we have first Joanne retired, so we have Sonia as our new accounts specialist. And now 2 weeks ago, Tracy started, and she is still being trained by Judy, and Judy is planned to transition out by August 4, which I think we have a meeting, actually next month's first meeting would be around August 4, I believe. So, yeah, we'll welcome Tracy to the board meetings. From now on, we'll see her on a regular basis.
Anyway, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're
Thank you.
glad to have you, and like I said, don't worry about anything tonight. It should just flow fine. Okay, oral comments, anything that's not on the agenda, anyone wish to address the board on items that are not on the agenda? Hearing none. Trying to think, we do have a public hearing. We're gonna do that later after the consent agenda.
No public hearing. Are you
Okay.
on the right agenda?
Yeah, it doesn't, the words are there, but it's.
Yeah, the words, I'm just taking right off your roll, just had to write under oral comment, I want to make sure that it was in here. Okay. The next thing we have is the consent agenda, and on that consent agenda, we have approval of the minutes for May 4th, 2017, approve of the financial statements for May 2017, approve the warrants for July 1, 2017, the SAM flow report for May 2017, the monthly review of the current investment portfolio, the connection permit applications that were received, excuse me, monthly water production report for May 2017, the rain report, the solar energy report, and the monthly public agency retirement service report for April 2017. So is there any item that any board member wishes to remove from the consent agenda?
Yes, I would. The first one, the minutes of May 4th.
Do you want to move it or just make a comment on it?
I'd like to move it.
Okay.
And the reasoning is, and I'd like to take credit for this, but I really can't. I have to give credit to former Director Tholog. He must have read this much more carefully than I have. But anyway, the issues is that Tanya's presentation is referenced on page 7, but it isn't transcribed, nor is the PowerPoint that she worked on from included in the minutes. And then there's also an issue that the minutes omit from the Bartle Wells oral presentation by Alex Handlers. It didn't transcribe the presentation. And there was a letter submitted by Chris Tholog that was omitted.
Okay. Other than the minutes on May 4th, can I have a motion, please?
I'd like to move approval of the rest of the consent agenda.
I actually do have one more here, that on the financial statements. I just have one question on that, and it's in regards to where it says item 4610, property tax receipts, $80,502 above budget. The district received $192,794 in ERAF funds, which was split between sewer and water funds. And I somewhat recall last year, didn't we agree that we were going to put those funds into the water reserve? Scott,
Well-
do you remember?
I'm looking at staff to see if staff recall.
So you're saying, and this would have been last year's, I recall that at one year we decided to do that. Not certain if this was last year, but at one time we approached the board with the question.
We did it once, and did we set a precedent that we were going to do that in the future until the water reserves were up?
There's something in the minutes from 2015. Let me see if I can
So, the short answer is, thank you, I have to get back to you
Okay.
on this, because I obviously have to look into this, but it's a
Right.
good point.
find this.
Okay, we can address that. Oh, yeah, can I have a motion for the item 2 through 10, please?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, a second.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor? We need a roll call. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, why don't you do a roll call, please?
Okay. Director Slater Carter,
Aye.
Director Boyd,
Aye.
Director Wilson,
Aye.
Director Harvey,
Aye.
Director Huber.
Aye.
Okay. All righty, moving right along to old business. The first item is to review and possible action concerning sewer authority mid-coast fiscal year 2017-2018 general budget. Comments?
Yeah, thank you, Dwight. We've been presenting a draft budget before at the June 12th, at the May meeting here. Subsequently, the SAM board met on June 12th. The first budget that was presented was looked significantly different. We actually anticipated that the SAM board would approve a revised general budget for the distribution to the member agencies. And we now have that in front of us. The changes are mainly in the, I think exclusively actually, in the infrastructure division budget. That was before between $4 and $5 million. Right now, this was dropped down significantly to around $1.5 million. So this is the first time that we actually see an infrastructure division budget that's based on a SAM-approved 5-year capital improvement program that is really addressed to, cover the existing problems at SAM. So right now we're really focusing on fixing the failed pipeline. So Sam is asking for increase to the general budget, and that's again due to the infrastructure division budget of around $1 million, $1,033,000. Overall amount that Sam plans to spend under the general budget is an increase of 25%, total of $5.1 million. Montara's assessment would increase by 31%, and that is now to $1.1 million. So our recommendation is to adopt the resolution of the Montara Water and Sanitary District consenting to approval by Sewer Authority Mid-Coast Side of its general budget for the fiscal year 2017 and 18.
Okay, so before I bring it to the board, I have, but by anyone who wishes to present to the board, I do need that blue slip filled out, please. Anybody wish to comment on the SAM budget proposal from the audience? Okay, so maybe the two of you or who represent us can speak to this, please.
We recommend passage. This is not an ideal budget. When we were discussing this at SAM recently, I put on the table the proposal that the three agencies collectively put another $500,000 towards improving the IPS, given the current condition that it's in. We know that spending money to do urgent or emergency repairs is much greater than if we get in there and do the proactive maintenance. Half Moon Bay still has concerns about funding anything having to do with the IPS. For the audience, I'll reiterate our long-held, and I think well-supported stand that maintenance of the collectively jointly owned intertie pipeline system is a mutual responsibility to be shared among all three agencies. I believe the JPA actually spells that out pretty clearly if you read it with the intent to try to figure out how the three agencies work together. Where we landed on it, though, was to go with the budget that you see in front of you. This should not result in any kind of rate shock. It is focused very heavily on the most urgent needs. We do have a rather extensive list of other needs that we need to be getting to, and we need to be anticipating that our contribution to SAM in the coming years needs to be on the increase to catch up for some of the deferred maintenance that some accrued from just the downturn starting in 08, 09, where we all just tightened our belts and we stopped doing quite as much as we wanted to, but we knew we couldn't, the community couldn't bear it. That's one of the reasons. The other is that there's been foot dragging, and we really need to fix some of the things that have not been fixed. So this is a good start. So I recommend passage.
Catherine?
No, it's been a long and contentious, set of discussions at, SAM about the budget, and, Granada approved it at their last meeting. I recommend that we approve it now, and, Half Moon Bay will be discussing it, I believe, at their next meeting. But this is the time to get it done so we can get the projects underway.
I should add that we, I'll read this in the SAM report later, at the end, towards the end of the meeting, we had two items where the board approved pulling money out of reserves to pay for operations for the month, this month, where SAM doesn't have the authority to come to us and bill us because we haven't passed the budget yet. So this is actually coming to us later.
So, Scott, you said that you thought that it should be another $500,000, correct?
I think that.
Or let me re-ask the question in a slightly different way.
I put it on the table as we need to consider, given the list of things that we know we have to do, going ahead and ponying up that extra $500,000. And that's split, of course, between three agencies, with Half Moon Bay doing half, Granada doing 30, and us doing 20% of that. So it's like, it's not as big a number as it sounds, but it's something, I call it the stretch goal.
Well, see, I share your concern, that maybe even more so, you know, I saw an SRT report from 2009, and when I saw that report, to be honest with you, my jaw dropped.
Yeah.
That, and then at the May 5th or 4th meeting, when I asked General Manager Beverly Marshall about the condition of the force main, she reported all down the line needs repairs. The only section that has been done in the last 34 years is the Valamar project, which is right next to us here. And
No, we sleeved a good portion of it, using you take the liner that's got a polymer, you run it down the length of it and cure it in place. We did a good chunk of that, and she's not wrong that there's a lot that needs doing. And so I think in the moment here in the meeting, that may have slipped to mind, but I think the overarching point is right.
that's the, yeah. So that, for the sake of argument, if we didn't pass the budget, or do we have the ability to amend it upward to include that money that you were talking about?
We can always come back and kind of levy this on ourselves anytime we want. What we're doing right now is setting the budget so that this agency knows, well, so each agency knows how much we need to collect. We collect all of the money that we send to Sam. We do that for the sewer on the property tax roll. And the county has deadlines for when you can tell them how much to assess. So we're right up against that deadline. So we've got to get something passed so we don't know what number they need to collect.
Okay.
If we want to do more than that, we would have to do it out of reserves. Now, it's,
And unilaterally?
no, I think obviously the discussion was very long at SAM, and we had a couple of motions. We took several attempts at getting that passed. So we tried, I think, a total of 4 different motions. 1 or 2 of them had the extra stretch in. What we were gonna do is say, well, here's 2, start with this one, and then if you want, say we're up for the second. But it got late enough that we just wound up passing the one you see in front of us. And when I say pass, the way this works, and this gets confusing, so let me take a second to, there's a lot of people in the room, so I want everybody to understand. The SAM board runs what happens at SAM, provides the oversight and management. But when it comes to the spending, the owners have to approve the big spending. So the budget, we work on that down at SAM, and then we agree, yes, this is what we want to ask for, and then each of us brings it back to our member agencies, and each agency then, ideally, if everything goes well, approves it. Once we get all 3 agencies approving it, then we go back to the SAM board and we adopt it. So that process is pretty lengthy. I saw some receptivity to the notion that we would go ahead and try to allocate another $500,000 or some other number. That was just through a dart, and hit $500,000. I think just given the timing of how we went, that meeting, we just didn't get there. I think we could revisit, but it would have to come out of reserves.
Because the concern I have is that the deterioration is such that we want to be as aggressive about that as humanly possible.
Yeah.
So, that's constrained by money, but it's also constrained by the ability to line up contractors and to be able to schedule the work in and the weather and so forth. But the overriding principle is to be as aggressive about this as possible. And so what you're saying, we pass this budget, we can still revisit that at a later time to keep pushing to be as aggressive as possible.
Right, and I should be clear, the thing that hung us up was Half Moon Bay's desire to put work on the intertie pipeline system under a category that the Joint Powers Authority agreement spells out as something where each agency has the option to participate in or not, instead of the section where we're maintaining the things we have. This is the crux of the debate.
Yeah.
And for trying to shoehorn maintenance of this decaying infrastructure into this notion of new project, it's like, and what I brought out was like, you know, I buy tires because they wore out on my car. I just did this recently. It cost me a lot of money, but it's not a new car. It's not a project. It's maintenance on my existing car.
Yeah.
And we've got pipeline that's 40 years or older, and you know, you got to do maintenance on it. This is, I think, the thing that's hard for. This is where we disagree, and we look at the way the authority was brought together, and everybody brought something to the table. Everybody paid for something or went and got grant money, and we assembled it all, and then the agreement says, and now we all own it together. And there's this notion of how much we agreed to do. So all of the intertie pipeline system, the size of the plant, that's scoped out the agreement. Something new might be, well, let's run another sewer line up 92 to the top of the hill or something. Well, then we'd all want the option to say, well, no, we're not signing up for that. That's the whole notion of a new project where people get the option. But we all have this together and we've got to maintain it.
Okay.
That's, I think we're all on the same
Yeah,
page here.
so, okay, so that's basically it, to be as aggressive as possible about this.
Jim?
Scott, just to reiterate, the money taken out of the reserves for this month, would there be a priority to put that back in?
Yes, that was actually part of the vote, that we all agreed that as soon as money's available, the reserves are replenished. Not this whole delay thing and never pay back.
Okay.
Because as you know, I mean, you were there when we all grudgingly agreed to pull money from reserves rather than have them pay to a rate increase.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to clarify Scott's response, and maybe there's a misunderstanding, but it's my understanding that the SAM board at any time can ask for more money, and I think that was your question. Can this budget be amended mid-year? And
Oh, I was
the
saying
answer
yes.
is yes.
Yeah.
And the funds wouldn't necessarily have to come out of the SAM reserve.
Oh, I'm in our reserve.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Then I'm clarifying this for myself.
Thank
They
you.
would have to come out of our reserves, yes.
And Granada's and
And,
Half
yes,
Moon.
probably
Yeah.
all of them.
And there have been occasions where we've done work on the intertie pipeline system where Granada and Montara both said this is so important, we're going to do it, even though Half Moon Bay didn't want to open up the checkbook.
Okay.
And so we have what is now deemed, and we hear it constantly. This year with all the rain, we heard it at many meetings where staff said the holding tanks that we put into the Burnham Strip in Granada saved our agency many spills, because we had, those things were full. Our tank here, the holding tank here was full, and SAM staff was very carefully managing things to make sure we didn't have any overflows just from the sheer volume. It's been super helpful. Well, that was paid for entirely by Granada and Montara. Half Moon Bay gets the benefit because they don't get, the environment benefits. We don't get socked with fines over overflows that didn't happen, but they never paid for any of that.
Okay.
Okay, so let me understand where I think we're at. There's a recommended budget for tonight. It's my understanding that the SAM board is looking at a strategic plan to look at the maintenance over the next X number of years. Is that assumption that is accurate? Because I think what we're gonna have to do as a district is we're gonna get a estimate of what these bills are gonna be for the deferred maintenance and anything else. And ultimately, that has to go into our rate increase discussion for the sewer bills for next year sometime. Because I think we're up against we're gonna have to go through the.
Yes, right, you're correct. We can set the rates essentially once per year so that they get collected through the sewer service charge. This year, we were not able to go through that process to increase rates, so we're taking some money out of reserve that we also have to recover. And I think it's up to all three member agencies and SAM to develop really a plan on how much money do we have to spend in the coming years on this. and how are we going to collect the necessary rates to cover the expenses.
So I guess my only hope, and I know both Catherine and Scott, you're both well aware of this, is that we come up with a reasonable maintenance and whatever needs to be done over a period of time that we can budget for, because it is going to be a significant rate increase next year. There's no way around that.
Sam staff is putting together, has already assembled kind of an end-of-life schedule that we can use to operate from.
Okay.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we pass the SAM, approve the SAM budget.
Can we have a second, please?
So, let's see, this is a resolution, right?
I don't think this is a resolution. This is
It is-
review.
it is a resolution.
What does it say, resolution?
It's, yes.
That is a resolution. Okay. Why don't you redo the motion as a resolution, please?
Okay, I make the resolution to, let me read it.
Just a read right here.
There's a resolution of Montara Water and
Yeah,
Sanitary
that's right.
District
He's got it.
consenting to approval of the sewer authority mid-coast side of its general budget for fiscal year 2017.
Correct. I resolve that.
I second that.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Director Slater Carter.
Aye.
Director Boyd.
Aye.
Director Wilson.
Aye.
Director Harvey.
Aye.
Director Huber.
Aye.
Okay. Second old business is review and possible action concerning sewer authority mid-coast side fiscal year 2018 collection system contract service budget.
So every year, we're getting really two budgets from the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side. The board just approved the general budget. The Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side doesn't only provide the treatment for the sewer that is collected in our system, but also the field staff and maintenance of our collection system. And this collections budget needs to be approved by a separate resolution. We've also seen already a draft collections budget at an earlier meeting, at the May meeting. There are some changes. I think the only change to the collections budget is actually the removal of a vehicle replacement fund. So we see now a slightly lower collections budget compared to what we presented to this board before. So right now, the collections budget is a decrease of around $100,000 over the prior fiscal year, and that is mainly due to the lower equipment budget. In the prior years, we actually purchased a large flusher truck that somewhat inflated that collections budget. So it's back to normal. We also see a little change in the allocation of costs between the contracting member agencies. It's now based on the percentage of total lines cleaned and the percentage of lift station maintained. Before, it was simply a percentage of total man hours. So the 17-18 assessment for Montara is, for the collection contract services, is $279,411. So that's 13% less than in the prior year. The staff recommendation is to adopt the resolution of the Montara Water and Sanitary District approving and adopting fiscal year 17-18 Sewer Authority Mid-Coast Side wastewater collection system contract services budget.
I have nothing from the audience. Unless I hear something now, I'll bring it to the board and give it back to the two SAM representatives, please.
Clemens mentioned in passing that we've seen this before and it has less now. Both this and the budget that we just talked about went through a couple of rounds at the SAM board with and with the managers from the three agencies to go in and carve down some of the expense, things that we didn't need. And the things that we carved down were to make room for the things that we do need, like the maintenance on the lines. So this is a much tighter budget, and again, I strongly urge its passage.
Okay, Catherine?
Oh, sorry, I had to get off mute. No, this is less than from what we had looked at and discussed previously. And partly because of the fact that Sam has some, what can I say, budget, I call them planning issues. There, we aren't able to put together, due to past policy, we don't have much in the way of reserves and so on, and so it's pretty much on the as you go. I think we're doing well with this, and I would recommend that we approve it.
Okay, Bill?
Just two questions. The first one is, there was some talk that Half Moon Bay was thinking about contracting with someone else. Is there any developments in that area that would affect this budget?
It's been clarified by the city that they will participate in this collections budget. Is that correct, Scott?
Yes, this year.
Okay.
It's also quite clear that they have an interest in exploring other options.
So,
And let me just note, since we've got all sorts of people here and a camera with the rest of our public possibly watching, in the strongest terms, if they do that, I certainly hope that they provide ample time and notice so that we don't wind up having some kind of dire consequences for what that means for Sam's ability to conduct the same kind of services that they're doing now for us and for NADA. And it would have a big impact on staff, on equipment, on coverage, how are we gonna pay for it all. So that would be very disruptive if it were done hastily. So if they do it, I hope they take the time to engage us all so we can do it without a big disruption.
okay, so that also then makes that a
And I'd
question.
like to add that if they do that, and even the fact that that they have been discussing this, although not in the public forum at the Half Moon Bay City Council, it could put this whole recycled water program in jeopardy. I've been talking to folks, and if there are major changes for Sam, it would make funding the recycled water project very, very difficult, if not impossible.
Okay, so then the other issue about the replacement fund for, or the truck replacement fund, that, because there's so many variables here, that really does make sense to eliminate that at this time. Okay.
Jim?
No comment.
Can we have a motion, please?
I'll make the motion.
It's a resolution, so,
To adopt resolution of the Montara Water and Sanitary District approving and adopting fiscal year 2017-2018 Sewer Authority Mid-Coast Side wastewater collection system contract services budget.
thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Director Slater Carter.
Aye.
Director Boyd.
Aye.
Director Wilson.
Aye.
Director Harvey.
Aye.
Director Huber.
Aye.
Okay. Now, I think we're coming to the agenda items that many are here tonight for. The second item, or I guess item 2, is 2017 Water Connection Second Study Session on the capacity charge. And this is a study session. We do not anticipate any action being taken tonight. And with that, what I'd like to do is go ahead with the presentations. So Clemens, if you may, please.
Yeah, so this is real brief. So we had a public hearing on January 19 in regards to water connections, at which the well conversion financing program was presented and also adopted. At the March 16, 2017, we had a water connection work study that resulted in code changes that confirmed existing well conversion policies. Additionally, the preparation of a new water master plan and a connection charge study were announced at that meeting. We received the draft connection charge study and sections of the master plan at the relevant sections of the master plan at the May 4 meeting. At that meeting, the board directed staff to schedule a study session to expand on possible alternatives to the staff presented calculation of the connection charges, and also to allow the consideration of questions from the public. The full water master plan was received on June 1, 2017. And so we have now, we expand the staff presentation with Alex Handlers from Bartle Wells. He's going to present the comparison of the different approaches that are used to calculate connection charges that are standard in the industry. And after that, we will be available to answer questions from the board and public, and we also prepared for some questions that we already received by Chris Stolog at the, what was it, June 1? No, it was the May 4 meeting as well. Thank you. So if I may ask Alex to come up to the table, and Dwight and Jim, I'm gonna turn this slide on so.
So, question for the chair. I had submitted a letter asking you to reconsider whether or not you're doing this session, this item on this agenda. I'm assuming that you all received that, and you just decided not to respond.
We are going to do the session tonight as we put on the agenda. Okay, so go ahead.
So, let me turn this on. I hope your eyes are closed.
Like to stay where you are.
So,
Okay, so I think it's coming up. It's, yeah, thank you, Tony.
That's how
Got this down. Start. Okay. Here we go.
Great, well, thank you, good to speak to you all again. So what I was gonna cover, how do I make this thing advance, so I just tell you?
Yes.
Okay.
Just tell me.
Let's go to the
I
next
don't
slide.
Yeah,
Wait, can
I'll
you go
do
back
that.
one? Oh, I think that's the old, do we have a July 6th one?
Okay, 1 second.
Yeah,
Let
what
me
we're gonna
just-
cover, I mean, it's been about a couple of months since the last discussion of this issue. So first was gonna be kind of a refresh of what the background is leading into the capacity charge update, and a review of what's being recommended. And then after that, we had a number of questions we were going to address that have come up from various letters or in public comments, and talk about some generic fee alternatives in the industry, and turn it back over to the board for additional questions, discussion, et cetera. Oh, perfect.
So, this
That's
one's-
the right one, yeah.
Okay, sorry about
They all look
that.
the same. So that's really the goal. Again, no action tonight, but just to review the recommendations and address questions, identify alternatives, and keep the discussion going. So next slide. And next slide. Background is that the capacity charges, these are the one-time charges levied on new or expanded connections to the water system designed to recoup the cost of infrastructure needed to serve those connections. So these fees were last calculated in 2011, so a little bit over 6 years ago. But since that time, there's been a lot of changes here in the district. There's been a lot of capital improvement projects that have been completed to improve reliability. District's got new sources of water supply. You've acquired Pillar Ridge. Water use has come down successfully. Customers cut back due to drought. Local coastal program has set a growth limit of 1%. Growth is back online. There's a new public works plan. So lots changed, and so the thoughts were that it was a good time to review the capital program, the master plan, and with that, the capacity charges that are based on the capital costs. So current fees, again, go back to 2011. They were based on the water system master plan developed in 2011. In that plan, capital costs were allocated, whether they were needed for existing customers or for growth. At the time, there was a projection made that there, over the next 10+ years, there'd be potentially 600+ connections made to the system. So the master plan identified what are the specific costs that are allocable to those growth connections, and what are the costs that are not. And so the costs allocated to growth were about 8.8 million. The way the fee was calculated was taking those costs, again, these are only the costs allocated to growth, divided by the level of growth that they're going to serve, 8.8 million over 621 connections or 5/8 meter equivalents, to calculate what is the charge. It was 14,000 and change per connection, and since then, the district has wisely adjusted its fees annually by the Engineering News Record Construction Cost Index. It's a widely used measure of construction cost inflation, and that basically allows you to keep the charge in line with construction cost inflation. So the current charge I have here is $15,729. My understanding is that that was recently updated as part of the annual ENR Engineering News Record update, and now it's for a typical 5/8 by 3/4 inch meter for typical new home. The charge is $16,262.
I think you've got it right,
Okay,
yes.
I believe. I've got another slide. These funds are deposited in a separate fund. You can't use them for operating costs. This is pursuant to state law. They're used exclusively for projects that benefit growth. Going on to the next slide, real quick, the legal requirements for water and sewer capacity charges are governed by Government Code 66013. The basics there are that the charge cannot exceed the estimated reasonable cost of providing the service. So the law further goes on to say you can collect charges for existing facilities, for future facilities, but the code is relatively brief. It doesn't give you a specific method for how the fees are calculated. So agencies have used a wide variety of methods to come up with what is the fair cost of providing facilities for growth. Next slide. Fast forward to current days, the master plan was just updated. There were, again, projects identified for what's needed for existing folks and what projects are identified to meet the needs of new demands placed on the water system. In doing the water system master plan, SRT consultants and Tanya, they updated the hydraulic model they developed for the district. And what they do is they run different scenarios through there to determine if there's any capacity deficiencies. For example, they can run, what if we had 50 new connections? What if we had 100 new connections, 200 new connections? And with those increased demands, is our current system able to reliably provide water to those customers, or do we need to make improvements? So this is the hydraulic model that's kind of driven what are the needs of the system to serve growth. And when we go on to the next page, we don't know what the growth is going to be, how quickly growth is going to occur. So when you're developing capacity charges, what does it cost to serve the next unit of growth? Well, are we talking the next 50 connections, the next 1,000 connections? SRT actually ran scenarios for a number of different levels of growth, everywhere from 50 new single-family or 5/8 meter equivalents, 100, 600, 800, 1,000. And they developed what are the capital needs needed to serve each of those levels of growth. For example, to serve the next 200 connections, the hydraulic model indicates that the system should do about 3.5 million of improvements, fixing bottlenecks, making sure there's adequate fire flow, reliability, to serve the demands created by those connections. If it was 600 new connections, obviously there'd have to be more improvements made, and the costs associated with serving 600 connections is a little over 10 million in improvements to adequately serve those connections in a safe and responsible way. So that's kind of the levels of growth and the levels of capital needs specifically needed to serve growth, those levels of growth. Moving on to the next slide. This slide just shows it graphically. Obviously, the more connections, the more demand, the more improvements need to be made to reliably serve those. On the next slide. So what we did was update the capacity charge based on that data. This is consistent with the same approach used in the 2011 capacity charge study. It's a forward-looking approach. We call it an incremental cost approach. What's the cost associated with serving the next units of growth divided by those units of growth to come up with what's the cost for serving each 5/8 inch meter equivalent. Just to emphasize, I know there was talk about the GO bonds and, hey, we shouldn't be paying in for those with the new fees. And the answer is they're not. They're not recovering anything for facilities that were funded by the GO bond issue. There's no double counting going on there. They also don't exclude cost recovery for improvements and assets that were funded by existing or prior ratepayers, even though some of those improvements arguably can provide some benefit via improved reliability to serve growth. What they do recover is, as the new connections occur, they're going to pay in for the average cost of facilities needed to serve those new connections. One thing that was brought up also is about, hey, can the charge be different for new well connections or new homes being built, etc.? And our take is, and also confirmed with legal counsel, that these charges are based on new demands placed on the system. So it's got to be consistent whether the new demand is coming from a conversion from someone currently served by a well, or the vacant lot next door that develops puts a house on there and wants to connect to your system. It's the same new demand placed on the system, so the charge should be consistent with those. Moving on to the next slide. Again, the fee calculation is pretty straightforward for this type of capacity charge incremental approach. We take the costs associated with a certain level of growth, divide it by that level of growth, and it results in what's the fee per unit. And you can see when you're only dealing with the next 50 units, you have to do about 1.3 million of improvements. A divided by B equals a little over 25,000 per connection, and you can see how the charge changes with different levels of growth. If you had to do if we're basing the charge off 1,000 new units of growth, the hydraulic model indicates it'd be a little over $17 million of costs, and 17 million divided by 1,000 would be a little over $17,000 for a fee calculation. So if we go to the next slide, it shows graphically what is the cost per unit for new facilities to serve growth at these different levels of growth, 50, 100, 200, 600. It worked out that the lowest cost per connection worked out at the 600 level, where the fee is $17,100 for funding the average cost of facilities needed to serve those next 600 units of growth. So that's what's being recommended. It's the lowest of the alternatives that were developed by the hydraulic model. Moving on to the next slide. This is what the charge would look like for all the different meter sizes. Obviously, as the larger meter sizes put more demand on the system, the fee is proportionately higher. Going on to the next slide. Here's a comparison of the current fees for each meter slide with the updated charges. And here I've got the right current fees. I just updated those earlier today based on the recent ENR cost adjustment. And you can see for the typical single-family home connection with a 5/8 by 3/4 inch meter, currently the fee is $16,262. The proposed updated fee is $17,100. It's a little bit higher, 5.2% higher, and then you can see the comparisons for the other meters is there as well. Next slide. Just to emphasize a few key points, that these charges are just based on the cost of infrastructure improvements that's needed to serve the new demand. It'd be consistently applied to all new demand regardless of the source of that demand. One thing sometimes folks say, hey, can't we add more connections to the system without doing the projects? And the answer is sure, you can always add a few connections to the system, but your system's kind of falling in deficit in terms of its reliability. So that doesn't negate the need that these projects should be done over the longer term to bring everything up to snuff for fire flow and system reliability. So of course you can allow growth to occur first while you're collecting the fees, and as you do the projects, you're bringing the system back up to snuff to where it's supposed to be. The other thing I point out, the fees certainly aren't low. I mean, I work with some agencies whose haven't updated their connection fees in 25 years, and it's only a few $1,000s. So they're in the upper middle range compared to what we're seeing a lot of other agencies do, but they are certainly not out of line with what many other agencies do. And if you go on to the next slide, you can see here's a survey of a number of regional agencies. The current fees, this is a fee survey from May, so it doesn't include the escalated costs for Montara, nor does it for all these other agencies. Most of these have some sort of annual fee escalator, so everyone's fee would go up a tiny bit proportionately. And here what we're showing with the green bar that's in the middle is your current fee just for the 5/8 by 3/4 inch meter, and the green bar on the right shows it with the private fire service connection as well. Again, they're not the lowest fees out there, but they're by no means the highest fees out there either. You've got some again, even very large agencies like EBMUD, East Bay Municipal Utility District, who serves a tremendous number of agencies in the East Bay. Their charges range from, $16,000 in some zones to, over $37,000 in other areas. Dublin San Ramon Services District has a charge that's over $38,000. A very big component of that is the cost of water supply. So, again, not that someone charges more than someone else doesn't mean it's any more or less efficient. It's just that's what their costs are to meet their needs, their infrastructure, water supply needs to serve growth. Moving on to the next slide. We just threw on here's the updated charge just for the basic 5/8 by 3/4 inch meter connection compared to last fiscal year's charge for the other agencies, just to put it again in perspective. Moving on to the next slide. Clemens already mentioned the multi-year fee payment program. Your fees aren't super cheap, so there have been a number of well conversion folks who have said, hey, we might wish to convert, but there is a bit of a cost burden there. To address that, the district came up with a multi-year fee payment program where they can spread the cost of making the new connection, spread it over 10 years, put it on the property tax rolls for a low interest rate, or the interest rate is waived if they were connecting by the end of this year. So put it on the property tax rolls. People also tend to write some of that off in taxes, so maybe there's a little bit of a discount there. But so the district did try to take action to ameliorate the cost burden concerns of some of those existing folks with wells. Next slide. Here we're going to just some issues and questions and alternatives that have been brought out there. Some of the basic principles, one, obviously growth should pay its own way, is a principle that many agencies, but not all, adhere to, that if new customers are connecting, they should pay for their facilities. Likewise, ratepayers shouldn't be subsidizing growth, nor should growth be subsidizing ratepayers. The next thing is the balance between capacity charges and rates. These are really your two main revenue sources, other than you've got property taxes and interest earnings, things like that. But the higher your capacity charge that's funding infrastructure for growth, the less the funding requirement is for rates, and vice versa. So there's kind of two sides of the coin there, which is why I put that little graphic of a scale there. The third thing I wanted to mention, there are, I think, different legitimate perspectives of what's fair and equitable. There are different approaches out there, and some agencies have a policy objective of trying to, for example, encourage development, so they want to keep the fees down. Other agencies want to make sure that the ratepayers aren't subsidizing growth, so they want growth to pay the full share of costs. So there are different legitimate approaches. The next thing is everyone, the public has mentioned, and folks here have mentioned as well, that there shouldn't be any cost recovery for facilities funded by GO bonds. There should be no double counting there, and that's been avoided. And the last point, which I've mentioned already, the charge should be proportional to the new demand being placed on the system, regardless of the source of the demand. So those are some basic principles, and now I'll roll into some questions that have been raised and some of the responses to those, starting on the next slide. One that was raised, and there's been some letters, et cetera, received with good questions and good concerns. One is, are these draft capacity charges legal? And that's been run by your legal counsel, who confirmed in a letter, yes, these are legal, they've been vetted. There was legitimate concern raised that, hey, there was a legal suit back when the SAM expansion took place, that the assessments were invalidated by a superior court. doesn't that apply here as well? And that was looked into, and the answer is no. Those SAM assessments were invalid because the capacity improvements that were funded by certain folks paying the assessments also benefited a number of other folks who weren't paying those assessments. So they were getting a free ride, and the people paying the charge were allegedly overpaying. But in this case, there is no free ride. All these facilities that are identified for growth, they're not needed for existing customers. They wouldn't have happened for existing customers. In addition, the capacity charge, no one's forcing anyone to pay with it. It's a voluntary decision when someone wants to develop their property. So it's inherently different than voted assessments, and legal counsel is comfortable with the proposed charges that are being put forth. On the next slide, a legitimate question, hey, do some of these projects that have been allocated and identified as necessary for growth also provide some ancillary benefit for existing customers? And if so, shouldn't the existing customers have to pay for a little of them? And, from talking with the district engineer, we had a few conference calls. Really, at the end of the day, no, none of these projects would be done if not for growth. Sure, if you have to upsize a pipeline running down a street somewhere to serve growth at the end, does that provide some benefit to the houses along the way who don't have to replace the pipe as soon? Sure, but that's 40 years down the line, and there's no way the existing district would be using its ratepayer money to fund replacement of a pipeline that still has 40 years, for example. So the answer was no, not really. All these facilities that are identified for growth are exclusively being triggered by the new demand. Next slide. Should the capacity charges be reduced to give new connections credit for improved economies of scale? And this is a legitimate issue that gets brought up that, hey, when someone new connects, a lot of the district's costs are fixed. So as they connect to the system, there's a marginal additional revenues that are coming into the system that are not needed for the fixed costs when these folks are paying rates. So shouldn't this extra revenue source that's coming in for rates be credited back to the new connection? Something along these lines was brought up. And our take on that, after thinking it over and discussing it, was no. The economies of scale should benefit everyone proportionately. In fact, it's the new person connecting to the system that really is the biggest beneficiary of the economies of scale. If they had to build their own water system to serve them, it could be an exorbitant cost, but they're able to buy into an already developed system that's already being funded by existing ratepayers. If you were to give that credit to the new folks only, well, again, which kind of shifts the cost burden to the existing ratepayers. So, at the end of the day, everyone should benefit proportionately from the economies of scale. The next one, should well owners be given a break and have a reduced fee? And, in some levels, that's a policy decision, but on other levels, it's some legal issues there that's not being recommended from us or from legal counsel unless there's a real cost-based rationale for doing that. And there is no we haven't been able to develop a cost-based rationale for that, because as the new well owner, if the existing well owners, if they want to connect to the system, as far as the system is concerned, that's the same as a piece of vacant property being developed. They're both putting consistent demands on the system, and the capacity charge has got to be consistent regardless of the source of that new water demand. On the next slide, should properties that pay GO bonds, should they not have to pay capacity charges? And the answer is no. The GO bonds did not fund a full build-out system that has full water supply and reliability to serve everyone. The GO bonds purchased the acquisition of an old dilapidated water system, and it also provided some funding for improvements that benefit everyone to get the system a little closer to being reliable and addressing some of the highest priority deficiencies for everyone, existing and future customers. Next one, did existing customers double pay for the water system, came up in one of our conversations, and we'll leave that to folks' judgment, but the folks who've been here a long time, they paid rates to Citizens and Cal-Am. They were paying water rates, and a chunk of those water rates is rate of return on capital facilities. Unfortunately, the money they were paying for those facilities wasn't reinvested back in the system, but they essentially paid for those facilities over time through their rates. And then when the district took over the system, all the property owners, including the existing customers, again, paid for the system acquisition. So, you know, arguably, some of the existing customers had been paying more than they would think is their fair share. Next, would a lower charge lead to a lot of additional connections, which benefits everyone with, you know, great economies of scale? And we thought about that, and maybe there would be some additional incentive for some of the well owners to connect, but certainly there's a lot of other cost barrier for well owners. And when you look at a new property being developed, you know, having a capacity charge a bit lower, that's not what's driving the development. There's so many other costs for developing a new house or a new commercial building that we don't see in other places. Levels of growth, you know, massively changing due to the, you know, differences in capacity charges. So we thought for this area, not likely. Next page. Just want to cover a few other, so those are some of the questions, and I know there's some other engineering questions that will be addressed after this. Specifically, I think that came from Chris's letter that Tanya's come up with some responses to. But the next thing we wanted to cover, what are some other generic fee approaches that get used out there in the industry? And certainly there's almost an infinite number of approaches with how you value infrastructure and what you're going to include and not include, but these are some of the basic ones that get used out there. One is what's called a buy-in cost approach. What this is typically used for systems that are, you know, mostly built out. They've already done all the improvements. They've already funded everything. So they say, hey, you got to buy in for your share of infrastructure. We already built everything. You've got to reimburse us for your share. In this case, it doesn't apply to this district so much because there are a number of improvements that need to be built to, you know, reliably serve growth. So we don't recommend this. It doesn't have any cost recovery for capital improvements. Next is something called an average cost approach, where you kind of take the total cost of the system, the existing facilities and the facilities needed for growth, and divide by the total capacity of existing and future. So it's kind of like a long-term average. This approach would probably result in a fee that's a little bit lower than your existing fee. We're not recommending that fee. It gets a little more convoluted with cost allocations and a little more judgment thrown in there. And it would require existing folks to shoulder some of the burden of funding the improvements that really are only needed for growth. And again, the existing ratepayers have already had to arguably more than pay for their fair share of the system. The next slide, the incremental approach, that's the one that we're recommending. It's a forward-looking approach. Again, what do you have to do to meet the needs of the next increments of growth? Divided by the level of growth. It's consistent with what's been done in the past. It's been vetted by legal counsel. It excludes the GO bond funding. It excludes cost recovery for some improvements in assets that have been paid for by existing ratepayers that may provide some ancillary benefit to growth. So it's pretty straightforward, very easy to defend.
Can we ask you a question?
Let them finish.
Oh, yeah, I'm almost done. Yeah.
And then we do the question.
And then the final one is what some agencies do is a buy-in plus incremental cost, which would result in the highest fee, even higher than the fee that's being proposed, where there's, hey, you got to pay your incremental cost, plus we're also going to make you pay a buy-in for some of the assets that have been funded by ratepayers that provide potentially, you know, some benefits to growth. So those are kind of the four generic approaches that get used out there. Moving on to the next slide. So what we're doing here is, again, just, you know, there's a recommendation that's on the table, which is the report and the proposed fee that goes along with that. That's what's being recommended, but, you know, there are a lot of issues brought up from different sources that the board wanted to, you know, have addressed, and you may have more questions, and folks may have more questions that we can address here. But that's pretty much it. You know, we're still recommending this fee, and this is kind of, you know, we've been presented to the board, the public before. Again, we're trying to do that again tonight, and hopefully addressing some of the concerns and answer some of the questions out there. with the goal of getting board direction, where do we go from here after this meeting? Do we move to, move ahead with the existing proposed fee? Or does the board think that something else should be developed in its replacement?
Okay.
With that, let me
Thank you.
turn back
Alex.
over.
So let me recommend the following. Why don't we open it up to the audience for Q&A and discussion. I'd like to keep the questions, relatively straightforward. And then as soon as the audience has had, the satisfactory time for their questions and answers and whatever else process, then I'd like to bring it to the board for our Q&A and discussion. Does that work for the board? Okay, so we'll open this up to the audience. For anyone that wishes to do questions, it would be nice to have a blue slip so we could record it, please. And we'll leave this relatively informal, but I have discretion of the chair. If it gets a little bit out of hand, I'll do some call of order, but I'll assume it will not get to that point. So we'll turn to the audience for some Q&A and discussion. Go ahead. And if you don't have a blue slip, I really need it so we can get your name and all that.
This is not public, there's no action going to be taken here. It's a
No action
workshop.
is going to be taken tonight.
So I'm not sure why you need a blue slip for a workshop where we're going to have.
We
discussion.
just want to have, anyone who's giving feedback, we just want
I'm
to.
not giving feedback, I'm asking a question.
If you give your name.
My question is, you have an increment of 600 in your calculation. Number one, is that anywhere near realistic? Number two, since this is all about putting the burden on the new connections, what happens if you build this out for 600 and only 50 people connect? Then the burden's going to be on the ratepayers. So I don't understand where your math is coming from in all this.
So, Tanya, I think some of these questions are best answered by you. Let me just jump in with, ultimately, the 600, we're not building out for 600 connections at once. It's more really an incremental approach, and I think that's going to be your answer.
Right, exactly. We're not predicting 600 connections.
But he was.
No,
question
no,
about it.
I think that's misunderstanding.
He said that 600 gives you the least amount of price per unit. And that was the number that he recommended. So you
we don't
have it, you cannot have it both ways.
Sir, so there's going to be a call to order. This is the Q&A. If you read his thing, the most efficient one was at 600, but there had been no decision made on a slide. And again, if we can do Q&A and try not getting debates, I'd appreciate it.
How is that a workshop?
Yeah, you haven't answered the question yet.
So let
How
me,
is that a workshop?
let me address-
You're scheduling this as a workshop.
Chris, I'm not going to get in an argument tonight. This is
I'm
going
not
to...
asking for an argument, I'm asking for an explanation
You're starting
of the process.
You're starting with an argument, and what I said, and I asked...
No, I've asked for
Chris, I'm not going to get
clarification
into
on what
this.
the process is.
I'm not, the process is Q&A and discussion. It is not a debate.
No, the process, what
Chris,
you said you were going to do is a workshop.
Chris, I do not have any patience for this.
Well, I
We're
don't
going to
either.
we're going to do Q&A and questions and back and forth.
And that
This
isn't
is
a
study
workshop.
session.
So let's just be clear, what you're doing is what you did at the March meeting, which is don't
Chris,
circulate what you're doing to the public,
Okay.
and then give an explanation and buffer your consultants from the people that need to ask the questions.
That's your point. Go
That
ahead.
is my point.
Okay, I do have a question. I'd like to hear an answer to it.
Sure, yeah, we're not saying there's gonna be 600 units in a certain time frame. That was done last time. Often with these fee calculations, you have to pick a unit of time for how you're gonna assess the fee. And in this case, what happened was, I think very wisely, the engineer said, hey, what if we have 50 new connections? What's the cost gonna be? So if these guys were gonna do the fee calculations, we're gonna base it off the next 50 connections, it'd be a fee of, maybe go back to that slide that shows the orange. So it's a cost per unit, and so, we've looked at different levels of growth.
But okay.
Or do
my
you
question
expect
is
600?
that-
Yeah, over a long period of time, the district certainly has,
Is this a
these
discussion
facilities.
or is this a presentation you're making? My question is, what happens if you overbill?
Oh, that's
Who's
question.
gonna take care of that? It'll be the existing ratepayers. And you have absolutely, you picked the 600 number out of the sky without any study whatsoever on how many new connections you're liable to have. So,
So I think there is understandably some confusion due to the fact that this district was for a very long period under a moratorium. No water agency in California plans to be in a moratorium. When we repealed our moratorium in 2010 and then subsequently approved it with the California Coastal Commission in the San Mateo County in 2013, we were very careful to build in mechanisms to ensure that this agency will never get into a similar situation. No agency in California has a limited amount of connections. You look at growth, and this is exactly what we're doing here. So to calculate the fee, we are indeed picking a random number of connections, and it is the number of connections that we can correlate to an amount that we need to spend to improvements that add up to a certain dollar amount.
do you realize
Those
how absurd
dollars-
it is to pick
those
a
dollars-
random number of connections? I mean, that's totally
Those
absurd.
dollars will not be spent at once. They
It's
will be
absurd.
spent
Okay,
over a
sir,
period
sir.
of time.
Where is your
You've-
planning?
you've made
Where
your-
is your
sir,
projection?
you've
No,
made- you've
where
made
are
your
they?
point.
Answer the question.
He, sir, you made your point.
No, I haven't. You haven't answered the question. Where are your projections?
Why don't you hang on, I got a loose lip up here.
Say that over one more time? Oh.
Can you go back one, and I will try.
Back
this.
one, this one?
Yeah. So, this is planning, this is actually pretty planning. So, the attempt was made to say, okay, we looked at 6 scenarios, right? If we add 50 connections, we would need to invest 1.29 million.
I understand that.
You divide that by 50, you get a connection.
You know, I have a PhD, I can divide, I can
I
multiply,
appreciate that.
okay? So where is your plan? Why do you think you'll ever have 600 new connections? What makes you think that?
I respect that you have a PhD, and I'm telling you.
Well, don't
let
keep
me finish.
repeating the same thing. You're dividing a number by number and coming up with a number. That's insulting. I'm asking you, where do you come up with 600? And how many lots are out there? How many people can you possibly serve?
Okay, go ahead, Scott.
Through the chair, Larry, you are
Scott?
persistently interrupting people who are speaking. And
Nobody's answered my question. I'll interrupt you too, so. go
what
for
you're
it.
doing is,
Is what?
you know what it is. And-
He's interfering with your carefully orchestrated presentation.
Yeah, I mean, give me a break. It's a very simple question. Where does 600 come from? Where does it come from? It's
Larry.
not a random number.
Hey,
I actually have
do
the
you
floor.
mind if I get my point, who went through the process and put a fucking loose slip up there?
Do anything you want.
So, excuse me, Larry, and I have the floor, the chair gave me the floor, and I'm going to use it. I'm going to point out that you're being argumentative and you're interrupting, and this is not
I could care
facilitating.
less.
I apparently, but that's not facilitating the discussion.
You're not either.
We have,
And neither is she, and neither is he, and neither is he.
you can make all the interruptions and argumentation and interjections you wish, but the fact of the matter is, when you're cutting people off as they're attempting to answer your question, you're guaranteeing you're not going to get to an answer.
Don't lecture me like that,
Well,
please.
Larry, you're coming
Where's
to-
the answer? Don't BS me. Don't divide a million by
You
15.
came here
Tell
to
me where you
argue
get
apparently, and we're
600.
going to listen to the things that you're saying. We're going to try to answer your questions, but when you interrupt, you're not letting us
I'm
get
not
anywhere.
interrupting. I keep asking the same question again.
And you
Where
keep
does
interrupting
600
even
come
as
from?
I'm saying that.
Well, you deserve it, pal. Okay?
Okay. Go ahead, Bob.
Oh, thank you. I do have comments about the plan later. This is more for general. I follow a process that includes things like you go from dialogue to discussion to debate to diatribe. In dialogue, you gather data to form an opinion, which is what we're trying to do. That's followed by discussion where an opinion has been formulated, but you listen for additional data just in case to confirm your opinion or to alter it based on the new information. In a debate, you defend your position because you believe it is the right one and you find faults in the other. And then you get into diatribe, closed-minded, interrupting, no courtesy, argumentative, the current interactions with the board. I would encourage, as argumentative and as hateful as you would like to be, is to go to discussion first. You can get to diatribe later.
I don't need a lecture from you either, pal. I mean, this is
Well,
ridiculous.
listen, shut the fuck up for a minute, okay?
What has this got to do with this?
Your argumentative nature is preventing from realistic discussions to get to facts. Because you are argumentative of only one position, and that is yours. And no other, will you let me finish for Christ's
Well,
sake?
don't look at me when you're talking then if you want to do that.
All right, I was trying to get someone to please stay with discussion, okay? There's diatribe here, but ignore it, please.
We're gonna bring quickly to a point of order here if I have to. Dave, would you have just talked about what we can and cannot do in this section?
Mr. President, even where you have a workshop scenario presentation, from a lawyer's standpoint, we're always concerned about what the record shows. People like to have recorded their thoughts, and they'll show up in the minutes. In order to do that, we have to have an orderly process. And by that I mean the board chair, the president, recognizes a member of the public or staff in advice comment. And members of the public certainly are entitled to direct specific questions. Generally, to be efficient and to have a useful presentation, the chair should recognize the staff person to respond to the question. And then the response should not be, the person responding should have the opportunity to complete the response. If there are further questions, again, in order to have an orderly process, to the benefit of both the public participants and the board, the chair, the president, should recognize the speaker. And if there are follow-up questions, that's perfectly all right. The chair does have the authority to place a time restriction on questions as well. But I think we've had a demonstration which would indicate the value of having a more orderly process. And questions are legitimate. And I have to say the question deserves an answer. If the staff can answer, the board president should direct the question to staff. If the staff can't answer, my recommendation would be that the staff be given an opportunity to research the issue and come back with an answer.
Okay, so given the advice of the council, we're gonna, everything's gonna go through the chair. I will ask, there is the question that's outstanding about where did the number 600 come from? If staff could answer that question, and then we'll move on to the next
I
speaker.
might add one other thing, Mr. President. The law does not require that a person necessarily identify him or herself in making a presentation. Generally, people do because they like to be recognized and they feel they have a quality presentation to make, and that will show up in the minutes. But you're not legally required to either sign in or identify yourself. But usually for the benefit of the knowledge that's being presented, it's helpful to have that person identify him or herself.
Okay, so the question to the 600, if someone could speak to where that number or the rationale.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, if I may, the idea of this table and the approach that we have taken after reviewing several options is to look at the capacity of the system and then look at the existing system and then look at the capacity of the existing system plus these 6 options. Existing system plus 50 connections, existing system plus 100, and so on, and up to 1,000. These are theoretical numbers that we ran that will correspond to certain capital improvements that would be required to accommodate these connections. The district system is very interesting in the sense that most of the growth would be infill, as you know. It's empty lots or lots that are being subdivided, and of course the well owners converting. With the exception of 2 large developments that are anticipated, one is a big wave and the other one is Sierra 1. And those are pretty known numbers. So it is, as opposed to, say, Dublin Solomon Services District or any other East Bay community where they would know where the growth is occurring and I would be assigned to that community, it's easy to say, well, this is it. With your growth is dispersed, so we have to do an incremental approach, which what this is, and say, okay, well, if we add 50 connections, we need to add so much in capital improvements, and then Alex says, and that would result in a very simple calculation, as the member of the public mentioned. Yes, it's very simple, straightforward. And so this is to demonstrate with what we had hoped would create dialogue and understanding that we're trying to come up with different incremental capital improvements that correspond to a certain number of connections, and then you just divide one over
No,
another.
I get the question. I think the question is, from what you're saying, we've not actually come up with the number of growth at this point in time.
That is
These are
correct.
the-
That is
These
correct.
are various scenarios that we would have to investigate further to come up with the exact numbers. That
Yes.
is so many words.
That's right.
Alex, you're shaking.
Oh, I mean, no one can project growth. I mean, so it's always hypothetical, how much growth are we gonna get? Some agencies attempt to make projections and they're uniformly incorrect. So, you know, every agency's got to decide what are we gonna base the fee on? Not necessarily saying, hey, we're gonna get this number of growth in so many years, because that's impossible to project.
And then what agencies do if they identify one number and they get another? How do they compensate for the difference between the projections and the actuality? Because there was that question about, let's say we say we'll have 300 and we end up having 2. How does that 100 differential get managed between the ratepayers and the actual new connections? How's that managed?
I'll tell Tanya to jump in here too. Yeah, certainly this happened with your last connection fee study, where you said, hey, you know, to serve the next 621 5/8" meter equivalents, you've got to fund, you know, 8.8 million of facilities to get there. You didn't have 600 connections over the last 10 years or so. It was a lot less. So a lot less money was recovered, but also on the other side of the equation, you didn't need to build all those facilities, so you certainly didn't spend ratepayer money to build facilities that weren't needed. So no matter what level of growth you pick, even if you were to pick 1,000, the district's not going out and spending $17 million the next day. That growth is going to occur over time. The district's going to size the charge appropriately so that the revenues it does collect over time are going to be adequate to fund those facilities. And periodically, you're going to be building stuff as you collect the fees and as facilities are needed to maintain the reliability of the system.
Chris?
Mr. President, for perhaps further answer to that question, I might ask the water engineer, for instance, scenario 4, which is as lowest, provides the lowest connection fee. Does that include improvements that would also serve scenario 1?
Yes.
And if you recommended and the district constructed those improvements, but you only had 50 new connections, would you stop at that level? As opposed to going to all 600 facilities and serve all 600?
That's right. We would never recommend overbuilding before the customers came.
And is your recommendation carried out in a document that you can identify?
That's right. It's in the master plan.
In the master plan. And how frequently is that visited?
Every 5 years.
Chris?
So the document that was missing from the May 4th packet would have provided some information for Larry. Your presentation had a demand projection, which, I mean, the whole presentation was very helpful. But this sheet in particular was looking at what are the current reserves, what's the current need, and then going at the maximum allowable growth rate, 1% per year. How would we utilize those reserves? And the fact is, 1% is 16, 18 connections a year.
Around 40.
And the CIP is looking at a 5-year program. So I think you could say, unless the local coastal program is modified and the public works plan is modified, that the maximum that you could get at 1% for 5 years is less than 100 connections.
What's a 1%?
Around 40.
40, so
That's the well convergence.
Over a 5-year period?
Plus well conversions, yes.
Big wave.
No, 40 per year.
connections per year,
Roughly
plus well conversions.
Right.
No, 1%. You've got 1,600 residential water connections?
We have 4,000 roughly residences on the mid-coast side. The 1% growth limit is
You
applicable
have
to the mid-coast.
1,600 connections in the district?
The LCP refers to number of homes, not number of connections.
Okay, so you're saying we have 4,000 in our service area?
That's right.
In the
No, no,
mid-coast,
in the mid-coast.
the LCP
How about
is,
in our service
The
area?
LCP
Because we're not going to be serving
LCP
beyond our
limit.
service area.
I'm sorry.
the 1%.
I apologize, I was interrupting,
No,
but,
go
well, I
ahead.
was, and I
No,
apologize.
you're clarifying. What?
The
It's not.
LCP growth limit is based on the housing, the size of the housing on the entire unincorporated mid-coast.
Right.
So that limit is, how that's distributed up and down the coast is not limited by the boundaries of the individual districts, only to the unincorporated.
So the 40,
And so the maximum that could happen in our district would be, like, if we took all 40 of the development into our district.
yeah.
I believe that's what we're talking about in terms of, that's where the 40 comes from.
Okay, so we pegged the absolute maximum. If we wanted to look at the scale, the continuum of what's reasonable, what's at the other end?
we do not.
Well, we have one data point, which is what were the connections from 2011 for that 5-year period? How many connections actually occurred?
I think that is actually a question that you asked before, right? And we have
And I
Answer.
believe it's about 3 per year. Yeah.
Pardon?
It's about 3 per year.
3 per year, and what
historically.
did we project in 2011?
I think we're again repeating this question, and if I may,
That's right.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair.
As long as it stays civil, we're fine.
The purpose of the prediction that we had before, as the general manager, Ellen, put it, was to get the district out of the situation of being
Yeah.
in the moratorium. We have done a lot of work to prove to the Coastal Commission and the planning agencies that the district indeed is capable. We had shown of serving the growth. We had successfully shown to the planning agencies and the resource agencies that the district can serve 621 connections from the 5 years ago with the resources available. That's what that number was about. It wasn't a prediction. But the point is that eventually, maybe they won't come, maybe they won't. It is not the point of that calculation.
But it was the projection, it was the projection. And what I'm trying to understand is I look forward at a similar process, materially different, because we're not just coming out from under a moratorium. We've got a public
Exactly.
works plan.
Yes.
We put an enormous amount of effort into crafting that document.
Right.
So it's a different situation, but it's context. So when I look at this, I'm looking at 8 million and change identified as capital projects that are solely to support new customers. And in the 2011 document, we had identified a similar number, $8 million of improvements. So the question that I asked on my May 4th letter was, one, how many connections did we actually get? And you've answered that. The other question was, of that $8 million worth of identified projects that were 100% for new connections, what did we actually do?
Okay. I'm prepared to answer that question.
So let me make sure I understand the question. Of the $8 million that was in the previous document, the question is how much has been spent to date of that?
That's right.
Yeah, the number was 8,211,000, and there were 8 projects, one of which was Big Wave. So there were actually seven projects and dollar figures for those. So my question is, you know, and some of those were a water main upgrade program. You know, so what I would have expected at a working session, what I want to understand is water main extensions and upgrades are done routinely. Not extensions, excuse me, I misspoke. Water main upgrades. Sometimes you've got a problem that you're correcting, a leak in a force main, right? So, but some of these mains have been fully depreciated for years. So the question I've got is, when you list water main upgrades, how are you calculating what the value is to current users of taking a fully depreciated main and replacing it with a new one? Now granted, at the same time, you may be increasing it from a 6-inch main to an 8-inch main in anticipation of some level of future service. But to say that there is no value to existing customers for doing that upgrade, I think is a mistake.
Well, first of all, the first question was how much was spent, so let's get that out first. And then the other discussion
Yeah,
is.
fair enough.
So,
And if I may, Mr. Chair, there's a one kind of lingering point I wanted to make regarding growth, if I may, before I would go on to the how much money was spent. In addition, you are correct, the LCP allows 1% growth. The LCP also assigns the district with priority connections that are set aside, that are outside of that 1%, and part of Big Wave potentially is that.
Of course, Big Wave is funded by Big Wave, right? I mean, these major projects have their own
That is
capital
correct.
improvement program.
okay, so again,
And they're funded directly from
yeah,
that.
and you're right, but let's stay focused with the question if we could, please.
Oh,
I am.
we agree.
No, not you, I'm talking about so just stay focused. The question is, of the $8 million, how much has been spent to date?
So,
Is that helpful?
no, I
That's the
have
list. Do you
the
have it?
answer. So we had, we implemented a project of restoring the existing water capacity at $150,000.
Which one of these was that now? Of the existing list? Which one of these would it be?
Which one?
This is the 2011 new customer.
This has nothing to do with this, because you're asking me about the old program, which ones were implemented.
Yeah, what
They're not
did
in
we
this
spend?
program.
So you're saying that none of the
None of the
projects that we listed for new customers was actually done?
No, I'm not saying that at all.
Okay, what are you
I
saying?
am saying that your question, let me repeat your question if I understood it correctly. You're asking from the 2010, 2011 capital improvements program of $8-some million, which projects were implemented. You're showing me a 2017 capital improvements program, which is looking forward, not backward. So.
Sorry, I handed you the wrong sheet.
Okay.
Okay, just for clarification, can we just come up with the
No,
numbers
this is
of
the
the
same
question?
sheet. Chris, I don't need this. I'm just gonna answer your question, if I may,
Please answer the
Mr. Chair.
question.
So, the district
This is-
implemented,
Excuse me,
Please
this
let her answer the
isn't,
question. Please let her answer the question.
the district has implemented 5 major projects. First was the restoration of existing well capacity at $150,000. Second was skate improvements at $50,000. The district built the Alta Vista tank number 2 at $3.9 million. The district installed valves and new valve stations at $15,000. And the district implemented water main upgrades. Those are specifically increases in sizes for new customers at $398,000. This total comes up to $4.5 million, which includes $3.01 million for new customers. So this is distributed. This 4.5 million has been distributed. 3 million to new customers, 1.5 to existing customers.
so are you saying that we added 15 customers and we added $3 million of improvements to serve new customers?
That's correct.
Okay, then back to Larry's question, which was, 15 times 15,000 perhaps, average what the connection charge would be for those 15 people over the last 5 years is much smaller number than 3 million. So, and I think Larry's question was, okay, the delta between that, which is almost 3 million, is that being picked up by the current ratepayers?
Alex?
That project was financed, I believe, by a state revolving fund loan, so a very low interest rate loan. So it's gonna be paid back over 30 years.
Yes.
And the intent, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that as these, capacity charges come in, they're gonna be helping provide a source of revenue to pay for the new customer share of that debt service.
Okay, good.
It might not always be exact every year, but if the fee is sized appropriately, over time, it should balance out.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the question, and again, I'm a layperson, I'm trying to understand this. If you are securing these improvements financed by debt, and that debt, both principal and interest, is being picked up by the ratepayers. It's the portion of the budget that is debt service. Yeah. So those 15 people who paid maybe 15,000 paid for their share of that, and they're also now paying for the debt service on the balance. So they're paying debt service on the 3 million, as are all the other existing users, right? But the difference is they paid their share up front. They were required to pay their share up front going into this. Now they're being assessed for the debt service on a principal that they already paid.
We avoided that in the new fee. We don't have any buy-in for the excess capacity. Under that very principle, if someone connects, they're going to be paying some debt service like other ratepayers. So that's all left out of the new fee calculation, as was been brought up, to make sure there's no double counting.
So, but you can't take the debt service out of the budget, right? So all the current ratepayers are paying that, just as they're paying the operating costs. And those 15 users aren't receiving a reduced fee schedule on their water bills because they paid their 15,000 up front.
Okay, I think we get your point. The
Yeah,
point is that
okay.
if you make, I mean, I think your point is well taken. The district at some point has to make assumptions as to what expected growth is going to be, correct? And so therefore, the infrastructure that you're making, the improvements you're making is based on assumption over a period of time. If I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that how we calculated previously, you had it wasn't cleanly separated, unlike what you're doing going forward. Is that it in so many words? And yet, even if we start developing infrastructure, there is still a risk that if the anticipated growth as addressed by the district is off, there is a risk that it could go to the ratepayers. Is that in so many words correct?
If you fund the facilities before you receive the
If
revenues.
you fund the facilities
which
before.
Sometimes does happen. I mean, you are under, I think, mandate that you have to provide water for growth. So there are occasions where an agency does, the most obvious example is when the agency has to build a wastewater treatment plant to serve new growth. They have to build it before the growth can occur. They fund it with debt service. It gets paid back. Some customers who have connected inevitably may be paying a connection fee, then they became a ratepayer early and they're chipping in a small part of the rates for debt. It's a very small part of the rates. Other customers may connect later. Maybe they missed some debt service payments. They're paying some at the end. So none of this stuff is perfect, but we've tried to avoid any of those issues with the fees that we've calculated going forwards
Right.
by not having any buy-in component in this incremental cost approach. So it doesn't include buy-in for this Alta Vista tank, for
And
example.
I-
Even though there's some benefits, we assume they become a ratepayer and they start chipping in. So
Right.
looking forward, this is not an issue. Looking backwards, does stuff like this occur? With every agency it does. It's never perfect.
And nobody's got a crystal ball, right? So we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. If there's a demand there and we don't provide it, we get static, right? If we build capacity and it's not needed, you're gonna get static. But the thing that strikes me is this dichotomy that $8 million has real value to the system. Every piece of that has value to the system. You know, Clemens tight management of this whole system is made easier when there are pieces that he identifies as being needed either for replacement or expansion or more efficient monitoring of what's going on in the system, the telemetry, or more storage. You can say that those things are for new users, and when the concern I've got is it really isn't that black and white. And what you seem to struggle with, and I don't mean you personally, what you struggle with is none of those methodologies are perfect. You're trying to implement one that is as fair as we can possibly get it, right? And my concern is in this situation where we have over-projected what the connections were going to be, we built $3 million worth of new infrastructure and only had 15 people show up. That wasn't a mistake. It's capacity and functionality that is absorbed into the mothership. So what I'm trying to understand is when you put up these kind of numbers, and as you said, you know, you don't, or maybe it was Clemens said, you know, we're not doing this all at once. You know, it's got a plan for 5 years of how we do this incrementally. And obviously we're going to be making adjustments if the connections don't pan out to be at the level that we projected or we're expecting that we'd have to serve, right? Or maybe big wave blows up, or maybe big wave accelerates. We respond to that stuff. But what I find particularly unsettling is having this absolute idea that these projects are for the new people and these projects are for the existing people. And because the projects that are for the new people, you know, if it's similar to what you have multiple purposes. So say new capacity
I'm
for
going to summarize
tanks.
a little bit. So I think what you're saying in so many words, you're just
Can I finish my
but
sentence?
just
I mean,
consolidate it down a bit if you could, please.
I haven't even gotten to my questions yet.
I know, that's why I want you to consolidate it down.
Well, that's why I asked you to delay it so you have more time. Though additional storage, is it necessary to serve additional connections? Yes. Does it provide other value? You bet. It provides redundancy, it provides additional fire protection. You know, those things can't be just discounted and said, well, we wouldn't have done the project if it wasn't for these new customers, because frankly, I think we would have. You know, so the question I've got is, can we be more flexible at looking at this so that it's more explainable and understandable and acceptable to people out in the audience? Who are they? Well, I don't know, because we didn't notice this.
Okay,
I'm
Wait a
sorry.
minute, point of order. What I'm going to ask for right now, do you have any other questions you'd like addressed?
Yeah, I had my whole May 4th letter, which none of which of those
Okay.
questions were incorporated into this packet.
Do you have?
And I have a comment which I sent to all the board
So
members.
you have one more minute in this discussion, I'm going to move on. So do we have the questions in paper? We can
Yes.
answer it at once.
Yeah,
Okay,
I sent you the letter,
Chris?
right?
Chris, would you please sit down? We'll answer the questions on that. Thank you.
Oh, so forget the minute, huh? Okay, got it.
Thank you.
I believe, would you like me to go over the?
Please.
I believe most of the questions have been answered through Alex's
None of the questions have
presentation.
been answered.
The report, so question one, the report states that Bartle Wells is using incremental cost approach for calculating updated water capacity charges, as has been used historically. What other methodologies are relevant and worth consideration? Alex just spent that whole presentation talking about that. Question two is talking about table 1 of the 2000.
Can we have a point of order, please?
Let's just wait. Dave has made a request. Let's just wait.
Go Go ahead and proceed.
Question 2, table 1 of the 2011 Bartle Wells Water Capacity Charge Reports projects 270 connections and so on and so forth. And we have just talked about this answer to this specific question. Which of the projects were undertaken and what were the expenditures? We just answered that question. Question 3, what is the methodology and data sources used to generate the estimates of new connections being projected in 2017 draft? We answered that question. We have no estimates of new connections projected. These are just scenarios. Question 4, it talks about project cost distribution, new customer CIP, and asks about how the allocation relate to one of the 6 scenarios. I would appreciate if Chris can actually, this references the CIP, and we discussed the CIP at 2 board meetings, twice. So unless you, Chair, would direct me to go over the CIP, this is a lengthy discussion.
We can defer that for now.
To when might we defer that?
Chris, go ahead.
Same questions for other projects. So questions 6 and 5 were answered first at the May 4th meeting and then second at the June 1st meeting.
Okay.
So we answered all the questions.
Okay. Now, remember, this is not the final session on this issue, so we have an opportunity to review this, and we may have to come back and review the CIPs at a later meeting, but I'm not going to do that today. Bob, you had some Q&A, please? Did you have, you said you had further?
That's enough, I just wanted to get to discussions.
Okay, we're at the discussion, you said you had further?
Yeah, no, that's fine, that's fine.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to bring it to the board. We'll start with you, Scott.
Anything right at the moment.
Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, Alex, can we look at, this would be the water capacity charge survey, the bar graph,
Which page? Do you have a page number on the bottom?
16, I believe it is.
This one?
Yeah. Okay, that, when you're formulating a proposal like this, you basically have to start with certain assumptions. Okay, one of the assumptions is we're a water district, like other water districts. Seems simple. But see, I would argue that we're not. And there's a number of things that make us discernibly different. Okay, one is we had a moratorium. Okay, number 2 is that we had a buyout. We converted from a private utility to a public enterprise. 3, that we have something that, correct me if I'm wrong, that I think is unique to this graph is the only other one that I'm aware of that has any wells within their system, private domestic wells within their water district, would be a Coastside County Water District.
I think a number of them do. I think Santa Cruz, Soquel Creek Water District, Scotts Valley. I mean, so
And
they're all
Midland.
Mid-Peninsula Water District that serves Belmont. So you're not the only one, but you're right. You did have a moratorium in which people had to put in wells in order to build and get service.
But we also are on a different scale than the others in terms of how many wells there are within the district as a percentage of the overall enterprise.
Most
Yes.
likely.
Okay, so that when I look at this, I look at it from an entirely different light. Okay, and that entirely different light is that in the year 2003, okay, that there was this vote to take this over. People on wells voted on it. People that were customers to Citizens Utility voted on it. Okay, and that in the process of voting, that they all had certain expectations. One of which was, okay, we have this water moratorium, that if this is lifted, anybody that's on a well, and now I'm not gonna get into the urban, rural, and all that sort of stuff, but people that were on a well, some had deed restrictions, other had permit obligations that said that they would convert onto the system as soon as water was available. Okay, but as part of that understanding was there was nothing in the year 2003 that alluded to that water capacity charge, because the water capacity charge came into effect in April of 2011 for the first time, from what I can tell. I may be wrong, but from what I can tell. So therefore, that I'm trying to make the case that in looking at this, we have something that is discernibly different than other districts, and that is these private domestic wells. And so how do we integrate them into the system in an equitable way, given the fact that they did enable us to buy the system? You know, so that by way of analogy, you buy something, it confers some a link to that asset, some sense of ownership or some rights to that asset. And so therefore, that you can say yes, that under the general obligation bond, you can make the case that the system that was purchased was highly defective. I wouldn't argue with you for a second about that. Okay, but the fact is, it was still part of purchasing the initial, you can't go any further until you have ownership of it. So they participated in the ownership of it. But yet, they're not participating in any benefit from it. Okay, sort of hold it for a second. Okay, and at the same time, they paid in for the property taxes all the way through. Okay, so they're different than new construction in that regard. Okay, so then you get into the whole argument, is this really analogous to a school district in which my wife and our children are grown. You know, we pay into the school district. We get no benefit out of it except a societal benefit for a more educated population. Okay, but now, if our granddaughter, for some reason, comes to live with us, she can go to the school system, and because we are part of the existing system, there's no calculation for the incremental cost that she would burden the system with. She's just allowed to attend, right?
Well,
Okay,
there is for
so
new development.
what's that?
There is for new development, often there's a school connection fee, capacity charge for
Okay,
schools, police,
but
fire.
But this is where I think it really gets tricky, is we're lumping in well owners with the new development, and I would argue because it's convenient, because that's what everybody else does.
So Bill, let me ask you a question. So obviously you're putting value into being here based on purchasing everything you've said. If you were to come up, we have a set amount of dollars that are being spent to both provide water and to do new connections.
Right.
So the question I think you would have to think about as we go forward is almost getting to the point of, how do you allocate? What are you thinking about in the allocation formulas based on what you're trying to say? Have you thought about that? The reciprocal, that is new development, I haven't thought about that at all. So I'm sort of taking, Alex, the way that you've come up with this, doesn't strike me as something that I need to dig really deep to sort of see if this really makes sense. But on the well owner thing, it just seems to be unique enough that we need to make some accommodation for the fact that they have a vested interest in the system, and they have historically, and they participated in it historically. So let me ask a question to legal counsel first. Given that fees that we charge for any new, the connection fees is restricted to new use, given what Bill said, what flexibility, it looks like that some districts are are undercharging for their connection fees. I mean, I can't imagine.
Some haven't been updated in many
In
years.
Palo Alto, a connection fee of $5,000 clearly is not covering connection fees costs. I mean, I can't imagine that's even being close. So what do districts do when they're purposely underestimating their connection fees? How do they do that legally in a way that gives you some flexibility?
Well, the connection fee and capacity charge must be related to identifiable facilities, or it's a capital charge. And so the capacity charge must be in proportion to the facilities that capacity, that charge will build. You don't have to build them right away, but you must account for the use of the capacity of the charge by identifying facilities that charge is going to pay for. You don't have to bill them right away, but you have to plan for it, and there has to be a rational relationship between the charge and the cost of the facility.
I get the fact
Now-
that money has to go into facilities,
Right.
but does it forbid them to undercharge and then take what remains of the facility charges from your connections out of ratepayers? Can they do that?
Right, no. The ratepayer fee, service charge, meter charge, and so forth, goes to operational expenses and some capital improvements, which have been paid back with that charge. Even so, that portion that goes, well, whether it's on operational expense or capital allocation, must be accounted for. You have to be, it has to be in proportion with the charge, whether it's a service rate or connection charge. The board has a little bit more flexibility from a legislative discretionary standpoint on allocating charges for the service charge, but still it must be cost related. Now, not directly related to finding some kind of basis for treating a well differently than another connection. There is now pending with AQUA, the Water Agency, California Association of California Water Agencies, a proposed constitutional amendment, but it has to be done. It's still in a drafting stage. We took a look at it today. The proposal is to provide for an amendment to the state constitution, which would allow water agencies more flexibility than they currently have for setting rates. And the underlying purpose for that is to allow social considerations to be made in paying the fee. In other words, providing a lower fee for low-cost income people. You do that now, but you do it indirectly by limiting on the amount of quantity. Again, this is the service charge, not the capacity or connection charge. And our focus tonight really is on the capacity charge, which is a capital facility charge. And I would be hard pressed to find any legal distinction between a well owner's use of burden on the system from any other new connection. The facilities are the same, the burden is the same, or it's allocated the same. So, to make some kind of distinction on a well owner's status, we'd have to look, frankly, from a legal standpoint, we'd have to look at the service charge. But if you do that, then you begin to take into consideration somebody else is paying for that portion which is not being paid for by the well owner. And you've got some discretion on that, but on the service charge. But then what we're looking at, in this case, we're looking at operational costs. And there again, you would have to make some distinction as to how a well owner's burden is less than a non-well owner's burden you might be able to make a finding, a factual finding based on the fact, on the moratorium issue.
Yep.
But that would take some research and some empirical calculations by your engineers and rate advisors.
So the basis of what I'm saying is really in the form of a request to put our thinking hats on, that to be able to accommodate a vetted person. A well owner has been in the system since the beginning in many cases. That's, and then you could also, as part of that, in looking at it, is that one of the persons that spoke at Pillar Ridge was John McKeon. And he said he went back and looked at how much he's paid as far as the general obligation bond and the property tax. And his calculation, and I know John very well, he's a very precise person, that he calculated an amount that was very similar to the $17,000 water capacity charge. Now, he's in a different situation than most as far as how much he put in and so forth. But could you also address the sort of concept that a well owner is in essence been prepaying all along?
Well, yeah, there again, we're getting into legislative discretion and what you would find, what kind of factual findings you could make that would allow you to categorize a well owner differently than somebody else that uses the system.
Yeah.
I might add that, by the way, that as far as the bonds are concerned, it's not a case of whether you're a ratepayer or a user of the system. It's a matter of, that's based on property ownership. So
Yeah.
properties outside the service area have paid to it.
So, so the
Bill, if I may,
yeah,
Alex,
okay.
you know.
Oh, I was gonna say one point, yeah, I mean, you're right that anyone paying GO bonds has got some vesting in those facilities that they've been funding. Same with folks with vacant land. I mean, they voted for the water system as well. I mean, it helps everyone's property values and the whole, you know, when they want to connect. So some people may have owned property for many years with the intent, hey, eventually we're going to build a retirement house here. I mean, I've heard people say stuff like that at these meetings. So, I mean, if well owners get the break, I mean, how do you differentiate between those two folks? And the third thing is that they are getting the benefit of the GO bond in that the capacity charge doesn't need to fund all those facilities in the buying of the system that was funded by the GO bond. It's just the additional incremental facilities that the hydraulic model has identified are needed to serve those folks. You're right, it's not always perfectly fair because different properties are assessed in different ways. Someone might have bought their house, 5 years ago, or when a well owner put in their home, maybe their property value went up, so they're paying more than the vacant landowner. You've got folks who've been here. It's not perfect when you get this GO bonds mixed in there because they're inherently imperfect because they're based on assessed value.
It's like a calculation of how many units you're going to sell in the future, or connections you're going to make in the future.
But the point I was making that they are getting benefit of paying the GO bonds because none of that's included in the fee calculation, number one. And number two, how do you differentiate between that well conversion to the vacant property next door who's also voted for it? Assume they were getting some vesting in the system and has been planning to build a house for a number of years. Shouldn't they be treated equally?
Yeah, I mean, Alex, this is where it gets really tricky because that person owns the property may not live in the district, may not have voted.
That's true. It's only if
So-
they live
so-
in the district.
So in all of these, there's none of this we can do with absolute precision. And so that at the end of the day, when you strip away everything else, this is the core of my concern, is we are a community. As a community, we voted on this, and to the extent that we can avoid having two classes of people, well owners and those that are paying rates, and that somehow that one is entitled and one isn't, something like that. I would like to do everything possible to make it so that we are still one community instead of being separated into two groups.
Anything else?
No?
Jim? No. Catherine? I see you, Chris, I'll get you a couple of those. Catherine?
Yeah, sorry, that's here, but anyway, I find this discussion very interesting and that I have trust in both the methodology and the execution of what we've been looking at. Every single one of the people in the urban area who bought their house after it was built, in their purchase paperwork, there's a deed restriction saying that when water became available, they would tie in. They would connect to the system. Every single builder, since about 1990, since that, 2000, it was before that, it was in the 90s, signed an agreement with the county saying that when public water became available, they would connect. These were not surprises, or they shouldn't have been. These were questions that should have been asked. And had we not bought the system, and were we not improving it, we would have more wells going in. People's houses would be at risk. There is polluted water, fresh water there. There was water with nitrates, there was oil, or insufficient supply. There were houses that were built with 2 wells to meet the minimum requirements for water production. This has been something that's been going on and has been talked about for decades. And we make good accommodations for the folks who are on wells in the urban area, and I think that's a critical thing to remember. And we have an ordinance, maybe we could consider adding for water that says if you're on a septic system and more than, I've forgotten the number of feet from a sewer line, we will not make you connect. But when you have to, and then you pay a fee into the district every year to help buy in. So perhaps that's something we should be thinking about for water. But again, this isn't something that has been discussed at the county level, at the coastal commission level, and at the MWSD level for decades. And in fact, there are a great number of wells in Half Moon Bay and in CCWD district. And there are no water connections for those folks from the district. When they need a water connection, they have to buy it from the black market or the gray market, whatever they're calling it. And I have heard that those are somewhere between $40,000 and $50,000, and that doesn't include the work to get it installed. And that's been in the paper. So these are not surprises. I think our consultants and staff have been doing a great job, and I applaud them in trying to make this understandable to the simple lay people. Thanks.
Okay, Scott?
Thank you. So, some interesting thoughts, and I certainly understand that some of these have been bandied about, but I'd like to take us back to when we had Measure B on the ballot. The key things, and I'm looking at the smart voter page from when Measure B was out there. We termed it an own versus rent decision, and the key factors there were the skyrocketing rates from an absentee landlord that was scraping off the marginal revenue and taking it away from the system rather than reinvesting it in the system. So we're concerned about the usurious rates and the plans that they already had approved in front of the CPUC. So we were looking at a likely tripling in something like 7 years of what our rates. At the time, our rates were probably some of the highest in the state. Since then, well, I'll get to that. But so we were concerned about that. We said we wanted to bring it down to like a rational rate increase. Nothing stays flat forever. And going down to something we never talked about. I remember talked to I don't know how many people here in Montara and Moss Beach, but we did not talk about trying to lower the rates. We talked about trying to solve the problem, which was stop this crazy rate inflation and start putting money back into the ground because we were concerned about the safety of our system. And while we were campaigning for that, we had, I believe that was the year where Callahan had to ask people to stop using water one day because our tank was down below 12 feet or something. It was getting dangerously low. And if that thing sucked air into the pipes, it would have been a big problem, right? So that's the kind of thing that was on the minds of this board when we put the measure on the ballot. It's what we talked about, going door to door and standing at the post offices and talking to neighbor after neighbor after neighbor. People did ask, are you going to cut our rates? People did ask, is this going to do anything for the moratorium? And we offered no hope for that other than, well, having it under local control lets us actually talk about those things. But there was no expectation. I think reasonably drawn from that rates were going to go down or that the moratorium was going to be lifted. We didn't know at the time if there was enough water to be had to take care of the moratorium. So we didn't talk about it. We don't talk about that. You can't. We didn't want to write a check that we couldn't cash, right? That would have been a full party promise, and we were very careful to avoid going into that. We all wanted to solve the moratorium, and then we spent the next 10 years working to get to where we could. I want to address the question of the expectation that some might have had that there might not be a connection fee. I learned about water connection fees from reading the Half Moon Bay Review. Sorry, our reporter friend is gone, but because I wanted to give some kudos to the review because they covered what was going on at CCWD as they were contending with how do they pay for the Carter Hill pipeline? What are they going to do with their connections? And it came down to they went ahead and pre-sold a whole bunch of connections in that range. And now if you want a connection, one of the ways to actually find one is to go buy it on the gray market from somebody who bought one years ago, but at what I would call gray market prices, which is north of $50,000.
Yeah, it's called secondary market.
Sure. This board has a policy that we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
You know, we can talk about that, but that's our policy, and but this community learned about those connection fees. North Coast has had fees, Coastside has had fees, all the neighbors up the hills had fees. So I'm really not too sympathetic to the notion that somebody came out here and made a very complex, big financial decision that they were going to construct a home here and operate off of some notion that didn't conform to anything that was happening in the neighboring cities, and have some basis and use that as a basis for, and now I want what's fair. What's fair? Look around, see how other people are doing it, and say, I don't know why I think Montara's going to be the one where that number is a whole lot lower. People have had the benefit of the homes they've built. They've been living in them. Some people have sold the houses. I know many people have sold the houses. So those people who built them got that benefit. So, I mean, we can talk about what's fair, but I don't know where some of these notions came from. Although I understand why that would be a favorable thing to imagine, but I don't see a basis for actually trying to stand on anything for this. So the reason that we bought the system, it was about skyrocketing rates and safety of the system. And now that we've had all this time to manage the system and get to where, with all the work that we've done with the county and with the Coastal Commission and all the work we've done to get the system to where we have been able to lift the moratorium and consider bringing people on, whether they be wells or new construction, or even commercial construction. That's when I look at fair, I'm thinking more along the lines of, okay, what's commensurate with what we can determine is needed to handle that additional capacity. That's the basis in state law. It's what our neighbors all up and down the peninsula do. And I appreciate the very careful working this through it that Alex did in terms of the different kinds of finance models and some of the pros and some of the cons. I'm okay with that approach. It's normal, it's thoughtful, it shows due diligence.
I don't have any problem with it as it relates to new construction or major remodels. That there again, it's more of a request than anything else. Is there a way that this can be looked at in a different way with regards to well owners? There is also that issue about that when they voted on it, there was no water capacity charge, and you put it on after the fact. And so how would that be thought of?
So,
And the other thing is, at the end of the day, I don't think this is going to mount to a hill of beans, because I don't think any well owners are going to convert over the system unless only one thing happens: their well goes bad and there's no other recourse but to connect to the system.
Okay, Ron and then Chris, then we're gonna wrap this up.
I think you have some very valid points, and I hope you understand that we have been trying to, we've been really looking at this from many angles and came up with this solution. Now,
I did not dispute that at all.
I do want to add one thing to this idea of not having to pay a connection charge. Every well owner paid a connection charge to the district, at least every well owner that receives sewer service from us. So any well owner who built during the moratorium paid a connection fee to this district, signing the deed restrictions. And Catherine, a correction, the county's deed restriction was put in place in '89, not in 2000, so it goes way back when. After 2003, they also paid a water connection fee for the fire sprinkler service. So, just, these are simple facts.
We're taking no action tonight. Chris, how about a minute or two, please?
That's all I need. So this is an idea that I raised back in January, but I think you leave the fee alone. I think you've got a strong basis for why people need to pay the same fee. I think what you should be focusing on is the well abandonment. So if there's a value to having fewer possible sources of contamination, problems that are prompting the county to require that they connect to the system when connections are available. That's not because they want to drive people to the system. There's a concern about private wells. So I think what you should be thinking about is a credit if that well owner will abandon the well and remove it, not leave it for ag use, get it out of our aquifer. And then think about what is the value of that to the system, to the district. And if there really is no value, don't do it. But I think there is value. And the question and the hard thing, and maybe Bartle Wells could help us with this, is to understand how can we peg that so that it's fair. We say all new connections pay the same connection fee, but if you've got a well and you abandon that well, there's value to the community and to the district to do that. And we don't have to set it at the connection fee number. We don't have to set it at 0. We can have a conversation about what would be fair that would require the people that have deed restrictions to connect, but they won't feel like they're being completely screwed. And we can maintain the basis of having equal connection fees for everyone who connects, because that's just such a morass of inequity, you know, what the property valuation is, how long they own the property, what they did with the property. We can't go there. It's like the geo bonds issue, right? But are you going to abandon a well? That's something that we can really
Before you
look
sit
at.
down,
Chris, if I could ask a clarifying question. So the well abandonment policy is being driven by county, and I think probably from the county health.
For a certain segment, of wells, right?
Well, right, we're not driving that at all. That's a county department.
Understood.
And I believe
Yeah.
it comes out of county health.
Yeah,
Right.
I agree.
Have you, I mean, this is an interesting thought, and I would like to also consider if there's anything we can do like that. If there's an abandonment, it's gonna cost some money, right? So anything that we could do to help facilitate that, now I'm not saying pay, but anything that we could do, that we've got borrowing capacity at really great rates and other things that we might be able to do. But in terms of this being driven by like county policy, have you given any thought to where that financial burden might rest?
Again, I think it really, I understand that the impetus for a lot of this and the responsibility for a lot of private well issues lies with the county. You're absolutely right. The question I've got is, all the studies that we've done over the years, and Catherine was just, voicing that in fact occurred, decades of studies about the wells, decades of concern about those private wells. If there really is a value to removing them, let's think of what a basis would be and offer that. And my guess is it won't be all the well owners coming over, but it certainly could be the ones that feel like they'd be more comfortable in the system. And if their well failed, you could say the policy is, no, there's no credit. This is a well that's gone bad, and you have to connect.
I think the thought is that who comes up with that is more of a discussion between the two. So noted. Okay, thank you very much.
Since you referenced Catherine, did you have any follow-up thought on that?
Yeah, I think that's an issue that I was raising to the county in the 1990s about water pollution and what they were going to do. And I will tell you what, the county had no concern, neither did the coastal commission. So it once again comes back on the back to the local district to fix what the bigger guys are screwing up. But my thought is, maybe we should look for a grant to help pay people to destroy their wells. And maybe we could use some of the connection fee money that come in to pay for looking for the grant.
Well, there's also measuring money that's
for
there
everyone.
too.
But that should be, one of the things that some of your comments are leading to is asking the current ratepayers to pay for these new connections and getting off the well. And to be real honest, my discussions with folks, they're not real happy that we ended the moratorium. They're sorry we have all these houses going in. They're not really going to willfully pay for the connection fees for new construction. They understood the risk of what was going on, and they paid, as I believe it was Scott said, they paid extraordinarily high fees just in order to have water flow. And I will tell you right now, looking at the water rates, our rates are lower and going to be much lower than the surrounding districts. So there is a benefit to connecting. How many people in a well get their water tested for contaminants, even once a year? How often do we have to test our water for contaminants? We do our water quality every year, but we do our source testing very frequently.
Up to daily, it depends on the contaminants, but we take daily water samples.
So these are benefits that people are getting to be on our water system. And they're getting benefits by, and like anything else, you get what you pay for. So if they want to stay on their well and take the risk that they're not taking, that's their adult, and they're making their choices. But that doesn't mean we should be asking the ratepayers to pay for their choices either. But anyway, as I said, maybe we can get a grant and we could use connection fees to, pay for writing to try and get it so that we can, find a way for people to, disconnect their wells and actually destroy their wells. It is a couple thousand or more dollars to do that.
Okay, I'm going to close the work study on this and go to the next old business, which is receive status update for the Montara Caltrans right-of-way acquisition.
Thanks, Dwight. Let me try to find my way through to my computer. Well, you know what? I think I can handle it without staff report right now. Ultimately, so this is a status update about the Caltrans right-of-way acquisition. We're bringing this up right now because since about 2 years, there are now first new developments, and we actually were notified by Caltrans that the Caltrans right-of-way has been declared surplus. So at this point, we contacted Caltrans again further with a request to meet, and we also are in contact with the planning agencies, the California Coastal Commission and San Mateo County. There is an LCP policy 11.33 that requires an overlay trails plan. It is not entirely clear what this process really is supposed to look like. Neither county nor coastal commission are 100% clear, so we are working with them, looking forward to working with the planning agencies and Caltrans to establish a process that essentially is the implementation of the policy 11.33. So we've also attached all the prior communication with Caltrans and San Mateo County as well as the Coastal Commission. In that, there is actually a number of supportive letters and resolutions from the relevant agencies. So we have support from San Mateo County, from the Coastal Conservancy as well. And Caltrans is actually looking very favorably at a new single owner of the property. We've been presenting this before. It goes some time back, about 20 months since we talked about this. The purpose for Montara Water and Sanitary District to acquire the property is watershed protection and water source exploration. So if we're looking around, there is very little property that is, there's a lot of open space. Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
There's a lot of open space, but however, not a lot of it is accessible for this district. We depend 100% on local sources. We're the only agency on the peninsula that depends on 100% local sources, which brings us to where every other water agency in California wants to be. We control our rates, we control our sources, and that turns out to be, at one point during the moratorium, this was clearly a disadvantage. Now this turns into our biggest asset. So I think that concludes the presentation.
A couple folks here who wish to talk from the audience. I'll start with you, Martin, please. Oh, Larry, I'm sorry, Larry. I said Martin, but I didn't get Larry. Please.
Yeah.
If you could come up to the microphone so we can get a short.
There's a few questions I have about this. One is, what would the watershed be protected from? And another one is, what would this cost the ratepayers to acquire and to maintain? Third one is, why can't you just buy the water rights rather than the whole thing? And another question is, it's not a pristine and unspoiled property. There are at least 3 rental homes on it. There are at least 2 horse stables on it. And how are you going to treat those people in this acquisition? And again, I don't understand why the water district needs to acquire open space.
Thank you. Chris?
So I guess my first comment is, the document I just handed you is some queries related to the attachments that Clemens provided. The only relevant attachment that's gone into the public domain since that point is a comment letter from Lenny Roberts at Committee for Green Foothills. That letter is available at the Mid-Coast Community Council website, as are all the other attached letters that Clemens added. This, my first question is, what is the board's intention with respect to operating this topic under closed session?
Again, I'm gonna collect all the questions from all of us and then we'll answer them at the end.
Okay. The issue of whether or not it's handled in closed session was the topic of the Halfman Bay Review letter, which appeared yesterday that I wrote. I was very encouraged that for the first time this is now on an open agenda with the district. I'm very disappointed that this has gone to this point with it being in closed session. The basis that I was given for why it was in closed session was that you were in a real property transaction to acquire the property from Caltrans. The section that Clemens referred to, 11.33, is very clear that the specific plan needs to be approved before the property is transferred for any purposes other than passive open space. And dating back, so the first document that I'm listing here is the permit to enter from 2014, where it states in the preamble, in the whereases, that MWSD also acknowledges and understands that a linear park and trail plan overlay specific plan, overlay plan, as mandated by the LCP has been approved. So that plan hasn't been drafted, much less approved. I've provided 2 quotes from a couple of the documents that are in here. One from Steve Monowitz, that the required specific plan has not been prepared, and from the California Coastal Commission requesting that you forward any draft plans to them. So I'm kind of befuddled. How can you be in a negotiation to acquire this property when the planning for it has not been completed? And how can you restrict the options that are being considered in a specific plan to only those for which Montara Water and Sanitary District is the recipient of the property? The plan is, there's a document that was provided in the packet, MWSD Plan of Service, Martini Creek Bypass Lands, March 2016. And it states, the district currently operates trails through its property that provide public recreation for the community and visitors alike. Well, I'd really like to know what those trails are. It's certainly not the California Coastal Trail, because you won't permit that trail to go through your property here. And it's not the Alta Vista Trail, because as I've raised before, you've got no trespassing signs on both sides of the road that's leading up to the trailhead. I talk to people up on the mountain who say, you know, I went over there and I tried to find the trail, but there's a no trespassing sign, so I backed off. The document also states the northern portion of the original Caltrans right-of-way was sold to the California State Park System as a condition of building the tunnel. No, that wasn't a condition of building the tunnel. And accepting the bypass lands that ran through the state parks was pretty straightforward, but what they didn't want was the property that you're looking at now. And I go into some detail in my letter in the Half Moon Bay Review about why, but I don't see anything about what would the district have to do to return that property to a proper, quote-unquote, pristine state. You've got a resolution from the Board of Supervisors dated May 24th. That's a resolution for support of Caltrans' donation of the property. I'd like to know if they would also support the sale of the property, and also, did they rely on the fact that you said the boards, did they rely on the fact that you said that the specific plan had been approved? When Steve Monowitz, who wrote a letter that's in your packet as well, said that that plan has to be considered, has to be done before the property is transferred. So the fact that you got a resolution from the Board of Supervisors, there was some miscommunication between them and their planning department, and certainly there's no agreement with the Coastal Commission that you can reverse the order of this, that you can acquire the property and then come up with a specific plan. And by the way, I mean, you guys taking on a specific plan?
One more minute, please.
That sounds a lot like land use planning to me. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I was sitting on this board and we were trying to defend ourselves from the accusation that what we were doing was land use policy. Now you're jumping into the deep end of the pool and want to take on that kind of a responsibility. Second page. Question, do you accept that MWSD's park powers are inactive and activation would require approval from LAFCO? I've got a quote from Steve Monowitz. He believes that it is. I talked to Martha Payotis at LAFCO. She believes it is. And why wouldn't it be? Because there are recreation opportunities, active recreation opportunities that you're not trained, equipped, or funded to engage in, particularly a community service center.
Thank you. Nancy Humboldt?
Well, certainly. Gary already addressed it. I manage one of those boarding places, those horse boarding places, so I don't know, since I haven't heard anything about it from Caltrans. And what are you guys gonna do with us? Because we've been there since, the ranch has been there since 1947, and, you know, we've been leasing it back after that. They took it for eminent domain since 1973. So, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Dave, I understand you want to say something.
Dave.
You.
Oh, this one.
You.
Yeah, Mr. President, let me see if I can place some of these questions in a legal context. First of all, let's take a look at the Brown Act issue with respect to closed session on property negotiations. That's justified on the grounds that the board is entitled to instruct its staff as to the parameters of negotiation, one of which is, are we interested, or do you authorize an expression of some interest in the acquisition? And two, if so, what are the terms and conditions? And those are you're entitled to discuss those in closed sessions, and you have. One of the questions that was raised was whether or not a donation would qualify as one of the terms and conditions of the acquisition. The answer is yes. In a sense, it's price. The other, the correspondence has been made available, and that you have in your packet as well, frankly, fully recognizes the legal overlay of a number of approvals that are required. And simply because the correspondence that's there between staff members, it's not something that would necessarily be made public until there's a reason to do so. And there's a reason because members of the public have asked for some open discussion regarding where the board is, where the district is with respect to the acquisition, if there is going to be an acquisition. The regulatory overlay is rather extensive, but not insurmountable with respect to the acquisition. The LCP 1133, policy 1133, is the basic guideline, and it speaks in terms of the present zoning of the property and also the trail overlay. It should be noted that, and this is included in our in the staff correspondence, that 1133 is based on the premise that the property might be acquired privately and subdivided and sold in various parcels. Hence the requirement for a specific plan. And the specific plan in zoning law simply requires a detailed explanation of the uses and restrictions of the users of property within the specific plan. The trail overlay is on top of that, but doesn't include all of the property in the bypass. So with respect to Montara's interests, which have been made public, from the standpoint of using the property as open space and perhaps recreational uses, and that's by no means made specific. It's one of the alternatives. It's referenced in the correspondence. Before you get to that point, because the LCP requires first of all, consultation between the Coastal Commission, the county, and Coastal Commission is the third party.
Caltrans.
Caltrans, Caltrans is the owner of the property. We're interested because we've got the policy statement made by the county board of supervisors that, at least at a political level, from a policy statement, there's interest in having Montara acquire the property. I simply say that because the impression that something is being done without knowledge of the public, I can understand that, but frankly, the communications have been on a staff level restricted by, and in the context of the LCP overlay. And to accommodate and comply with that, there have to be public hearings. They might be combined, but they would be at the county level, a potential LCP amendment, zoning changes, and a specific plan. And the specific plan may also take into consideration zoning changes. So there are a series of regulatory issues that would have to be addressed at a public hearing, perhaps a series of public hearings, at the county level. And then the local coastal commission level also would have its insight in its participation vis-a-vis the local coastal program amendments, if any are to be made, with respect to the property. And what the correspondence points out, and again, it's between staff members, not conclusive other than setting forth factual circumstances and interest, potential interest, based on your instructions to the staff, potential interest in acquisition, to raise certain issues. And those issues are very clearly, Montara's staff has made very clear that they're fully aware of the local coastal program requirements. But the first step is under the LCP for consultation between Caltrans, the county, and Coastal Commission. And that hasn't happened.
So my other question is, when did Caltrans formally deem it surplus property? It hasn't been all that long.
Yeah, so this was declared to us in late May. So this
This
is
year?
of this year.
Of
So
this
this
year.
is very, very new.
Okay, that was my understanding.
I wanted to add something to this notion of meeting in closed session. Since in the past 2 years, this board has met twice in closed session about this. One time at the last meeting for reasons that were just explained, and the same, I believe, I have to look it up, was in December 2015. Before that, there were Caltrans-related closed sessions as well. So this goes back quite some time, and Chris, you know what happened because you attended those.
Board. Any comments from the board, anybody? Bill?
Yeah, I actually, in preparation for this, I did two things. One is that I took a map of the right-of-way and just sort of walked and drove to sort of get a better sense about what it is and so forth. But I also spent some time talking to Chet Bardot. Chet Bardot is a former district superintendent for the California State Park System, and is also a person that I hold in very high esteem. So that on the basis of that, I'd like to just make a statement, and I'll give you a copy of it so you don't have to write it down. Okay. The right-of-way is public land for the public good. Caltrans has agreed to repurpose it by turning it over or selling it to another jurisdiction. In this process, it is important to keep in mind that Caltrans has some very basic responsibilities before doing so. They are responsible for leaving the property decent, safe, and sanitary. And regardless of the scenario, it is important to make sure that they fulfill this obligation. We run a water, sanitary, and solid waste enterprise. As a board, we were elected to make sure that the public interests are protected and maintained in the operation of this enterprise. Our interests with regards to the right-of-way are, number one, because it falls almost exclusively within our district, we have an interest in securing the rights to be able to extract water from it for the public good. Because we are charged with providing safe, reliable water, it is also in our interest to protect the watersheds that feeds our wells. To the extent that this property can help protect those watersheds, it's in our interest and is our responsibility. We don't have the expertise or the experience to run or manage this property. The management of this is a major responsibility. It's not to be taken lightly. We really need to partner with someone that does have the expertise, funding, and resources. If done properly, it is a win for the interest of the public we serve. If we try to do this alone, we are taking on a responsibility and a financial burden that we are ill-prepared to assume. Here are some details we must pay close attention to if we're able to reflect the public's interest, which in this case is the enterprise's supply safe, reliable water. One, as been talked about before, are the LCP requirements, and I won't go into that any further. Our major objective is to secure water rights and have access to extract it. It is not all that clear that this is as straightforward as I originally thought. Park Authority is latent and therefore not automatic. It is also not guaranteed that we will be able to extract water under Park Authority. Trying to simply purchase these parcels around the test bores may be an alternative worth pursuing, even though it also probably has some obstacles before it can be achieved. There are existing homes, both occupied and abandoned, that have to be dealt with. The management of these lands set up a landlord-tenant situation. There are three that I am aware of, a house on Drake, another one on Elm, and the Morningstar Stables. There are at least two instances I know where property owners claim that they have some form of first right of refusal to purchase segments of the property. That's another complicating factor. And whatever entity ends up with the title to the right-of-way property, that entity, be it us or anybody else, will become new neighbors of households that abut the property. It is one thing to keep everybody in a small neighborhood happy. It is another to deal with a neighborhood the size of this. There will be unrealized expectations on the part of those adjacent to the property that will surface and will have to be dealt with as good neighbors. There is a real potential that we will have to ask neighbors to stop doing something that they have been doing for a long period of time. We can assume there has been some encroachment and that some households abutting the property have carved off space for private use. We can assume that they will not be happy with having to discontinue whatever they have been doing. This is not pristine property, as has been alluded to. In addition to abutting houses, there is a lot of unattended underbrush, invasive trees such as eucalyptus and other exotics, and natural debris that have to be dealt with. I would also assume that there's deferred defensive fire protection measures that will require correcting. And just in general, from what I can see, Caltrans has done very little to actively maintain the property. We want to be able to protect the watershed for our sources of water. Being long, thin, and bordered by houses, many of which are on wells, undermines this property as an effective water protection zone. And I would from walking, it seems like that's especially true when you get below Linda Vista Road. So that's my comment.
Jim?
Yeah, Phil, thank you. I'm really glad to see you're engaging and thinking through these things,
Yeah.
and I'm in agreement on almost all those points, and I think it's a really good starting point. Did have a couple of comments. Let's see. One, if our signage up by the Alta Vista site is misleading and dissuading people from using the trail that passes through the property, then I'd like us to fix that, because it's long been our understanding that I was there at the Long Beach meeting, and the Coastal Commission instructed us to keep that open for the people who had been using the trail and for future users of the trail. So that's my understanding. If it's confusing signage, I'm all for, let's go fix that. I know there are parts of that property where no trespassing is actually important. If it's just a matter of improving the signage, let's do that.
By the way, yesterday when I walked through the area, I did notice there's a sign on either side of the path that goes up to the Golden Gate. And so that is in fact correct, that those signs lead you to believe that you're not able to go beyond that point.
Yeah, I've walked that a number of times too, so something must have changed since I last looked at that. Because I look at it specifically with the eye to the question of whether Coastal Commissioner Sarah Wan, when she brought this issue up, was the very last comment before they approved our public works plan, which we've been working so hard and so long on with so many of the people around this table. It was like, oh man, I can't believe, oh wait, no, that's a really good idea. And we're all like, yeah, totally on board with that. No objection to it when asked. And it was, of course we want people to be able to use that. So in answer to what trails do we currently support, we do support that one. And we also have the coastal trail that goes across the property outside our fence line. This is still done in collaboration with Montara, this agency. And we had discussions about what would happen with this, because we had been using this land for parking in this agency for years, for who knows how long. So it's not exactly the same thing, but we've done what we can with the property that we have here to facilitate the coastal trail passing through. I think we're all supportive of that. I think ultimately, eventually, we'd love to see better access to the view shed here for that. But we do have active trail that our property that this agency owns at the clear direction and permit requirement for our public works plan. So That's my answer to that question.
Okay, and just as a real quick aside, and then I'll shut up. It's also a very pleasant walk up Alta Vista
Oh,
these
it's
days
fantastic.
with the fact that the road surface has been.
I totally agree, and it's, even without the road improvements, but it's a beautiful part of Montara, and if people haven't seen it, get up there if you can, it's really nice. So, let's see, yeah, no, I'm sorry. But I'm really glad, Nancy, that you brought up the issue about the current tenants. I think it's something that we'll have to talk about. I don't see anybody wanting to, I have no idea what's going to happen with that. But what I do know is that we don't like making trouble with neighbors. If there's something to be accommodated, yeah, it seems sensible to me. So I'm really glad you brought it up, so that we can start weighing that.
And on to what Bill said, you're right, they won't do anything, because I've asked them, I said, there's trees that are gonna fall down with somebody, and I've already put in days and days of tree work out of my own pocket, and they're like, too bad.
You weren't the first person I heard that from.
In conversations I've had with people at the county, one of the things,
Sorry.
I'm trying to see right through you, they thought about what it would take to come in and manage that property, and it's gonna take some work, but we do already have experience managing a property, not a big chunk to that scale, but, in conversations with Clemens, he's got a pretty clear idea of what a bunch of these responsibilities are, and we've got a really able crew. And this would be, in many ways, an incremental increase over what they're currently doing. We'd have to budget for some of this, but for protecting the watershed, for actively protecting the watershed, this is.
I just want to know, I just want to know if you're going to take us out.
Yeah, I don't think that topic's been brought up until tonight, and so that's why.
There's Valley Ranch as well, they have a couple of houses.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a tremendous question. I mean,
I think what's really important, there's a lot of public hearing and interactions and public entities. This is not going to be happening tomorrow. This is probably a several-year process to go from point A to point B. So there will be plenty of opportunity to get all the needs known, and I think Bill has highlighted this is a partnership of some type that will have to be done to make this thing work. And my daughter actually loves horses, so I'm quite familiar with how horse ranches work, and I don't think we have a history of being nasty to people that are with us or around us or all that.
So there's a couple things I'll wrap up. One is, if you look at the really constructive approach to how the road got resurfaced, members of the board, Bill in particular, but staff, especially over the years, the homeowners along Alta Vista Road had a problem with the road washing out and eroding very badly. And they brought us a plan, and we couldn't get on board with it because it didn't take into account the actual regulations that were on how to do that kind of work. But over a little bit of time, built a partnership. So somebody there took the lead to start to try to drive the neighbors to organize and be able to have discussion. Board member, staff started working, and what we wound up with was something where I believe, based on the people who came to this meeting when we ratified all this stuff, was that people were very happy with the outcome and felt like everybody got a fair shake. I mean, you were intimately involved with that. Is that your recollection?
Again, I'm going to consolidate the time.
Okay, so, I had no overall.
Okay. Catherine? Catherine?
Yeah,
I know it's past midnight where you're at.
here's a little history on this. In about 1994, I got very concerned about the problems that well owners were going to be facing as they were starting to go in. And then I start looking at the maps and the ownership of the lands in Montara and Moss Beach, and I saw this big swath, and then by then the bypass. had been proposed, and then we were looking at tunnels, and the question was what happens with this land. And it seems to me that the people who should be making the decisions on what happens to it are the people who live in Montara and Lost Beach. And that's important because we've had the county making plans for us forever, but somehow they're always balancing our community interests against other different interests. It's the county that gave us the well problems that we're struggling with right now, that people are struggling with. To see how we're going to handle this financially. But I guess counting the number of lots that were in that Caltrans right away, and there were about, even given the at that point in time, 600 developable lots, given the county's philosophy. And that made me kind of nervous, given that we didn't have water, and they might be going in on wells, and we had a sewer moratorium, and so what was going to be happening? Who was going to be paying for all of this? And it has stayed an issue. So when the local coastal program was being updated, myself and others said, look, we've got to change the use on this. We've got to change the designations on it from R1. We've got to be able to get it so that it can be used by the community as it currently is being used. There are all kinds of trails through there. People walk their dogs, their horses, their bicycles. The trails plan has been somewhat developed, not formally, but by people walking it. And they walk in places and it's too steep, so they walk somewhere else, and they find they actually, people by hiking are doing some of the best planning that's going on. And so we got it changed, and I've been talking to the Board of Supervisors about this since 2000. And always I've been saying the community, of course, wants to work with the county. We want to work with and make this an asset for us to continue to use, as it is, because we lost our barbecue pits under the county at the Marine Reserve. We don't have a place where we can take our kids and have a party anymore outdoors for a birthday party. We need, the county we're growing and growing, but we don't have amenities of an urban area. The county doesn't have the money nor the will to do it. So it's up to us to do it. And in the water code, there is a specific section that allows a water district to use land for recreation purposes. And there are districts that do that. And there are some wonderful programs that we can look at in the future. This is a long time down the way, but we can do it. I'm not talking about assuming parks power. I'm not talking about becoming a community services district, although I can think of some fun things we could do. But let's just use the powers we have, and they're not parks powers. Arthur's right, but they are in the water code. And we're busy exploring and working on relationships. But I want to tell you about a story about
So Catherine, it's really late,
it's
so.
really what made me understand it. There is a house that was gone in near one of our wells. And it's on a septic system. And the septic system was, less than 200 feet from one of our major production wells. So I asked Dallas Hydrologic if there could be if there was a likelihood of pollution of our source of water. And everybody drinks that we have to treat from this septic system. And Gary and Mark looked at it and they said, yeah, actually there's a serious concern here. Well, it turns out the one who's in charge of protecting wells from septic systems is the county. So we went to the county, MWSD did. And we said, could you ask the developer to move the septic system to the back side of the lot instead of on the side of the lot that's closest to our well? There's space for this to happen. And we were told, no, they wouldn't do that. MWSD appealed this all the way to the Board of Supervisors. Dave Schricker came and testified. I think it was Mark Boishner who came and testified from Mellon Hydrologic. The Board of Supervisors would not ask people developing that house to move their septic system even 50 feet away from our production well. We have to protect our water quality. MWSD and the citizens of Montara and Moss Beach, we need to take care of it because we can't trust the county. And we can develop something that will work for us. A lot of these arguments that I just heard about not knowing what we were doing and things were going to fail, we had presentations given to MWSD by our interim district manager telling us that we shouldn't take over the water system because it was going to be an expensive failure. I know the people in Montara and Moss Beach. I know by working together, we can make this happen, and we can make this a place where we can have wonderful water for the community for a long time, as long as the community exists. And we can work with the county on this. There are lots of folks who are excited about this. I have been talking since 1994.
So Catherine, we're running really late. Can we give about another 30 seconds, please?
Yeah, I know. Let me tell you that it is 2 o'clock here, so 2 a.m.
My point.
Yeah.
But I just want to fill people in on the background. This is not a new idea. It's not a new idea for the community. It's not a new idea for the county. It's not a new idea for the coastal commission. It's not a new idea for anybody. But we're getting to the point, we've got the water system done, the sewer system done. Let's take care of the rest of our community needs and ensure that we have safe water. And that's what this is about. So I look forward to people coming and talking to us and to be able to have these meetings. But we have to do our homework first, and that's all we've been doing.
Okay.
So thank you. I'll stop now.
Thank you. Okay, Chris, you have 1 minute, then we're done.
1 minute. So it sounds to me like you've got some question about whether or not the government code trumps the water code in terms of how recreation powers are active or inactive or needed or not needed. I'd suggest that you address that up front now and understand where you stand so that if there's a determination that you need to deal with LAFCO, that you're prepared to do something along the lines of consolidation. And if you find that the water code is adequate, then you can go forward with the secure knowledge that your plans for the community will stand legal scrutiny.
Okay, thank you. All right, I just lost my, take on the next subject, because I just
Okay,
lost my.
thanks, Dwight. Yes, I had the same
We're
problem
on new
earlier.
business, I can tell you that much, and I know we're doing something about
Yeah.
sewer systems and things
So
like
the
that.
title of this is really Review and Possible Action Concerning Authorization to Advertise for Bids 2017-18 Sewer Improvement and Spot Repairs Project. And I'm gonna make this very short. We have a new sewer project that was designed by Newt Engineering. Pippin Cavanaro takes care of this for us. And here's here to present the sewer improvement project and spot repairs, which is going to be in the backside of the Montara, the main focus. So Pippin, if you can just briefly lay out what this is, what we want to do. Ultimately, this board approved a budget very recently, and this budget contained the anticipated expenditures for this sewer improvement project. We're talking about mainline improvements and spot repairs. Pippin,
Thank you, Clemens. If I could speak double fast, I'll be over really quick. Basically, in short, we have proposed, Clemens and I actively work on maintaining a budgetary outlook over a approximately 10-year period to try to look ahead and see how the budgets lay. And then as they adjust each year, we try to balance our communication with SAM for new needs, look at our current concerns, and then also weigh them against other factors like rising construction costs and budgets at SAM, which affect the overall costs of the district budget here. So from our 10-year plan, I'd say that our annual capital project is slightly smaller than we would have liked to have done without external costs like SAM. We normally would say about $875,000 was our projection a few years ago. We're keeping this less this year. And we are proposing to structure the bid just to help mitigate the risk both on rising construction costs and other district budget concerns, which we talked about earlier tonight, to run about 3/4 of the project, about $525,000 to $550,000 estimate on a base bid, and then have an alternate bid item where we try to control the same unit prices but extend it out over additional footage for a portion more, up to in the $600,000 to $650,000 range. We have seen an increase in construction costs this season, so there is some concerns there. We've also slightly adjusted our work areas based on the high rains that we had this year. One of your best areas, it's been a long discussion tonight, was this Caltrans property. That area receives a lot of water. We're actually going to be focusing our work in that same neighborhood this year because the rainfall and the water absorption. Too bad some of the people concerned about the watershed maintenance protection just left. The water absorption in this area is very high. We have one of the highest infiltrations probably per pipe length in the district at this pump station back here on Date Hart. And the district maintenance crews have complained over the years that they had trouble in the rain, and this particular year was very difficult keeping up with the rainwater coming in. So we're going to target as much footage, the majority of our footage repair in that area where a lot of water is soaking into the ground, and it's a very moist neighborhood to try to facilitate bringing down our infiltration. So mainly the streets are Irving and Hawthorne, above Date Hart, up towards Ivy and around the Sunshine Valley area, just adjacent to the property that was just being discussed. And I guess that's sort of the overview of the project. Does anyone have any specific questions on it?
I'd just like to thank you for doing the additive alternative line segments for consideration, because in the past we've had you guys come back and say, hey, things were great, we got a little spare room here, we got a really good bid. I just love seeing, even if we can't afford to do it this year, we have a real clear idea of what we would like to do.
Yeah.
I just really appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make a motion.
Just say resolution.
I'm going to make a resolution of the Montara Water Sanitary District approving contract documents, including plans and specifications for fiscal year 17-18 sewer improvement, spot repairs project, and authorizing advertisement for bids for the project.
Second, please.
Second.
Oh, wait a minute, I know you wanted to say something there, I'm sorry.
I recommend that the motion include a finding that the property is exempt from the requirements of the California Environmental Quality Act on the ground that it's for repair and replacement of the existing facilities.
So added.
So I'll basically give your language to Clemens, and we can add that to the motion.
Okay. So I added to the motion.
Okay.
No,
Roll call?
Director Slater Carter,
Aye.
Director Boyd,
Aye.
Director Wilson,
Aye.
Director Harvey,
Aye.
Director Huber,
All right.
All right, second new business. Catherine, are you ready? Review and possible action concerning AB 1479, Montara Public Records Custodian Records Civil Penalties.
So, I wanted to thank Catherine for bringing this to our attention. Essentially, AB 1479 would create additional California Public Records Act requirements. Sounds actually like a good idea at first, but that could have some significant financial impact and place some significant burdens on local agencies. What 1479 would mandate is that every local agency assign an individual or an officer as the custodian of record. Wouldn't be necessarily a problem here in the small agency. We do this anyways. The main concern I think that we have with this is that the measure establishes new civil penalties ranging from $1,000 to $5,000 for violations of the Public Records Act. And that will provide a financial incentive for serial litigants from across the nation. So that's, I think, a real concern, that there's tax dollars going to attorneys that find a good way to exploit this.
And I think this motion calls for authorized general manager to send a letter to oppose AB 1479.
That's what we're asking for.
Catherine, you want to say anything short?
I will put the motion.
Okay, you got a second and a, okay. Roll call, please.
Director Slater Carter,
Aye.
Director Boyd,
Aye.
Director Wilson,
Aye.
Director Harvey,
Aye.
Director Hebert.
Aye.
Third one is review and possible action concerning California Special District Association 2017 board elections. Glenn?
Okay, so we have, as every year, received the CSDA ballot. The ballot must be submitted by August 4, and there's 2 seats open. There's the seat C, and then there's the remainder of seat A, which I think is a year in the same region, so in our region 3. So the staff recommendation will be to recommend a suitable candidate on, authorize the general manager to submit the ballot for seat A and seat C. Now, I know we passed a resolution of support for you, Catherine. We didn't get a chance to connect beforehand. I don't see your name on the ballot. The choices are Stanley Caldwell, he's with the Mountain View Sanitary District; John Karapiet, Sanitary District number 5 of Marin County; or Robert Silano, Menlo Park Fire Protection District. And we need to vote for 2 of these.
If I could comment, Stanley Caldwell has been on the board for a long time and has been doing an excellent job. So
Okay.
I would highly, highly recommend that we vote for him.
Do you have any other recommendations for seat A?
I mean,
I don't.
maybe what we
I
could
think
do,
somebody-
one's a fire person, one's a sanitary person. So Catherine, one's a sanitary person, one's a fire person. Those are our choices.
Go with the sanitary
That's
person.
kind of my thoughts. Okay. I think we've given you direction for that, Clemens.
Thank you. Got it.
All right. Review and possible action canceling the next meeting on July 20th.
Yes, so that's the title, and we don't anticipate any important business. So we anticipate canceling the meeting and giving everybody a heads up with this. Ultimately, if we need a meeting, you'll hear about it early enough.
Okay. All right, I almost hate to bring this up. Sam, can we do a consolidated?
I'm loading the agenda real quick, and I'm sorry I didn't do it. Obviously, we approved the distribution of the budget. That was the very largest, most important thing we did. We affirmed that the SAM general manager reports to the SAM board, is reviewed by and evaluated by the SAM board, receives direction from the SAM board, and seems like I should go without saying, but it was important that we say that. We agreed to keep 2 meetings a month. I protested vigorously, but we landed on, we'll keep 2 on the calendar, but we'll strive to get everything into the first. With that, I also mentioned that we approved some drawing from the reserves, and thanks to Jim for reminding me that we insisted that we pay it back at first opportunity. That was it.
Okay. Catherine, anything to add to that, or I know, Bill, you've been at a couple of these meetings too.
Not recently.
Jim attended the last meeting.
Jim, you
I
attended.
was-
Yeah, Scott accurately portrayed the, thank you.
Fair enough. Mid-Coast Council, Catherine?
Catherine, anything on the?
Nothing to report.
Anything on CSDA?
Nothing to report.
Dave, attorney?
Nothing to report.
Directors, any of us?
No.
No.
No. Clements?
Yes, 2 items. The first one is that we published our consumer confidence report. It's an annual requirement from the state. This is the 2016 annual report. This is our newest. I know it's confusing because we're in 2017, but we're publishing the information from 2016, consolidated, summarized information. So this is up on our website and can be viewed.
It was in your bill too, I think, since I just got.
Yeah, it was, yes, it was also in our bill. The mail, okay.
Just in the bill.
And then the second item is, there was someone here earlier who came to talk about an unrelated item, and we've seen this all throughout town. The flyers about Richard Moss, who is still missing. And I promised to announce that there will be a search party on Sunday, this coming Sunday. What is it?
Well, today is
The 9th. So on the 9th, and anyone who would be willing to participate can contact the family under the number that is on all these flyers. I see that Richard's AAA card was found on Montara Beach on June 29th. And so I had a very brief opportunity to talk to the gentleman, and they're assuming that he's still somehow in this area.
Okay. What time is the search party?
I don't know, but again, anyone who's willing, please
Is it
call
going to
the
be in
number.
our district, in our area?
Yes, that was my
You're
understanding.
saying the AAA card of Montara Beach?
Yes, it says here the card was found on Montara Beach on June 29th, so very recently.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
That's it.
We do have a closed session. Are you good about getting that camera down quick? Okay.